we do it? Did we do it? We did it! Yay! Sorry about being late, guys. I literally was sitting on the couch at about like 5:45, ready to start streaming, and I dozed off. Straight up, I just dozed off. I just went to sleep. I was just sitting here, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna wait 15 minutes, and then I popped up, literally like a minute ago. Hey, Compton. How you doing, bud? Good to see you. Oh, my goodness. Working too much, man. Working too much. That's what I'm doing. Working too much. Capitalism's got its hands on me, right? Got its hands on me. Hopefully, today's internet won't be so bad. Yeah, the last couple of days I've been having to shut down the whole thing early because the lag gets really bad. So if that happens tonight, I will be on the phone trying to deal with that nonsense. Capitalism, it definitely doesn't work. Cha-cha-cha. Fantastic. Oh my goodness. I hope you guys are all doing really well out there, man. I hope you're all doing really well out there. I wish I hadn't gone into work today, honestly. It was just like for a little coverage thing because they were having a meeting and all this kind of stuff. It's just getting ridiculous. So, everyone in China is under arrest. I love this because it looks very authentic, doesn't it? It looks straight from FP. Experts at the Very Rich Guy Foundation in Washington, D.C. estimate that the total number of detainees in China's sprawling network of prison camps could be as high as everyone. Even the prison camp guards have all been thrown into prison camps, said a source. The CCP did not trust them. The entire CCP is also in the camps. They arrested themselves, too. I love this because ever since the National Congress that they just held, I've just been reading propaganda piece after propaganda piece after propaganda piece about the Chinese and the Chinese government. And it literally is because Xi Jinping and the Chinese people are preparing for war, right? They're getting ready for the Americans to pull the trigger and start actually doing like military work. And the capitalists don't like it. They don't like that China is preparing for war. They don't like that China is securing its own interests, is actually taking care of itself. And every single time I read an article, it's like, according to the measurement, the fake rich people feelings line that is the stock market, and according to the financial sector, China's government the Chinese economy is contracting. And it's like, okay, but according to actual measurements that are real, like according to the people, according to like employment data, and according to like general prosperity, like the people of China, oh, well, who cares about that? Who cares about the improvement or the prosperity of people, right? No, it's all that matters is how much money capitalists can make, right? So if that's the only measurement that you use, just how much money capitalists may make in a system, well, then yeah, the Chinese economy is probably contracting, and yeah, things are probably going bad because the Chinese are taking care of themselves and taking care of their own interests, and they don't necessarily give a fuck about the rich people feelings line that is these absurdist institutions that are questionable to begin with. Hey, Major, how you doing? Compton writes, John, you got a great musical talent. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I value and appreciate that. But I soon changed my mind about you sending your own songs to CDPR. But man, it would be so cool to have a commie musician in the DLC. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. That what is this? This is CDPR is the makers of Cyberpunk, and they're doing a contest right now where they would where you can send them a song and you might win, and if you win, then their stuff gets in the they'll put the song in the DLC and all that. I thought about that. I think that I would like lean right in on the country side of it, right? Like, how many people are actually like sending country music in, and like, what does cyberpunk like country sound like? Because it would exist. I think that I absolutely think it would exist. I'm actually doing a run of a new game of cyberpunk right now. I'm in the midst of doing it, and there are a lot of things that they could continue implementing to keep improving it. And one of them, I think, would be like this kind of thing. I feel this way about a lot of video games, that a really missed opportunity for most video games is the idea of live music. The idea of like, you think about like Skyrim. Skyrim, I think, is like the case in point about this. Like, there are all of these musicians around. There's a Bard's College. There's all this kind of stuff, but nobody actually plays or sings music, right? And the people who do, they suck really, really bad. Like, so bad that I'm like, is music a lost art? Do people not understand the concept of music in the world of Skyrim? It's like, and I understand why video game companies don't want to do it. They don't want to hire musicians. They don't want to hire people to actually play and record music and then have that music in their stuff. Like, they don't actually want that. They don't actually want to pay. So once again, right? The culprit is capitalism, right? Like, who wants to pay a musician to actually do something? And who cares? Why should it matter? Like, music, just the beating heart of humanity, just the thing that all humans are instantly attracted to, and that improves everything everywhere you go. Who cares? I remember when I was in Cuba, I went out to a restaurant, and we were, and the service was wonderful, right? I was like on the beach. It was a beautiful, beautiful environment. And literally halfway through the meal, the waiter and one of the hostesses just did a duet. They just did a song, right? And I just like was flabbergasted by it. It was like, oh, what the fuck is even happening? And they literally just like did, and it was beautiful. It was a wonderful song. They were wonderful. And I really thought to myself, like, I don't experience this kind of thing in the world of capitalism. Like, in the world of capitalism, you have like fucking dinner theater. Like, you've got like trash can bullshit that is lame, because nobody actually wants to pay for a live musician to exist within the space, right? That everybody's just like, oh, we'll just hit play on a recorder, right? We'll just like, why have live music when you can just put on a record or something, right? It's like, because it's different, right? It is different. That actually experiencing someone playing something live and experiencing it non-electronically modified, right, or amplified through a microphone or something, right? It is different, and it does improve things. But who wants to actually pay for, like, those people should just go die, right? Like, get a better job, right? Meanwhile, I'll enjoy all of the records that I listen to. China's GDP, good to see you, by the way, Grinning, is still growing regardless of the lockdowns. They announced the wages only grew 2.2%. When do workers in the West get 2.2%? Never. Yeah, exactly. And of course, like, the Economist would report on that by, it's an economic slowdown. It's an economic slowdown. And like, I've got an article here that I feel like really captures. Where is it? I'm the greatest. Yeah. This article is like laughable. Like, it's such total junk. China quietly abandons goal of overtaking U.S. economy, right? And if you actually read the thing, you find that it's all based on like, oh, they didn't say like 5 words that they had been saying previously, so that means that they've completely abandoned their objectives and their goals, and it's just like, it's like total trash, because like we're the West, so we're total fucking trash, and it completely ignores that like China doesn't base its economic success on whether or not billionaires are happy, right? Like that's really the hard truth that capitalists don't want to admit. That if Bill Gates were to stand up and be like, I don't like what I am seeing in China. The people are eating food and are living in houses. There is no homelessness here. I'd just be like, yeah, go get fuck Bill Gates. And so would all of the Chinese people. They literally are like, we don't give a fuck about your feelings. Like, we don't care about your stupid, petty, psychopathic, like, desires. Bill Gates literally is just like, I can't buy up all the farmland here and poison black people. Oh, this is what a bad country. Like it's literally where we're at this stage. Yeah, China's weak, but China's so strong. Exactly. I think this year's Sucks would be a good pick. Yeah, but I'd rather you use one of your throwaway songs. It would be a 6th Street Gang tunes. I mean, this. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. I've got this like persistent cough that I just am not really able to get used to, or get rid of rather. Cyberpunk horse armor DLC with country music, exactly. In Cuba, they can afford to give away performances for free because they don't have to monetize everything. Yeah, like I mean, or like at the very least, like one of the things that I think about is so good about the job that I currently have. Right? Underneath this sort of capitalist, ridiculous hellscape is that we're treated like adults. Like, everyone working is treated like we're an adult with adult opinions, and that, real simple stuff. Like, yeah, have like a cell phone. Yeah, check your email, you know, when it's slow or whatever. We don't care. Oh, you want to drink at the cash or at the bar or whatever? Yeah, okay. Like who gives a fuck, right? Like when you work for other corporate institutions, you are treated like an infant. That's one of the things that I think is really, really noticeable about what it is to live under capitalism, is that you are treated like an infant. And if you attempt to express yourself in any way outside of this infantilization, and there's a really great comedian, Aliza, I think her name is. Her new thing's on Netflix. She talks a lot about the infantilization of women in the society, and I think she's very effective and very prescient and very like piercing, but like most other commentators, she hasn't quite made the full jump into realizing, or into at least expressing, that the culprit is capitalism. That the culprit, like the reason why they need you to be an infant is so that you don't realize that your parents are psychopaths. Right? That infants worship their parents, right? Like infants are incapable of understanding that what their parents are doing is not normal, right? That an infant will just go along with what mommy and daddy are doing because mommy and daddy know best, clearly, right? And if mommy and daddy are going to, you know, enslave populations and destroy entire institutions and rip everything apart, then they must have a good reason for it. They're mommy and daddy, right? So this constant infantilization of the society is absolutely crucial. And so I think that there's a big reason why, like, you would never in any period of time, like if a barista said, hey, we should do a live music night, or I should do like some live music or something, that shit gets shut down immediately. It gets shut down immediately because you can't have, like, for God's sakes, like when I was working at Starbucks, if you had a little tattoo on your arm, you had to wear armbands and shit to get rid of it. Any kind of personal expression, the very idea of wearing a uniform, the very idea of wearing a fucking uniform, like a clown monkey suit, like walk into any of these establishments, A&W, McDonald's, Starbucks, any of them, and you look at the people who are serving you, and they're wearing these goddamn costumes, they look like, even if they're serious adults, even if they're like people where this is their career and this is what they're doing, right? They have come to look like children. They're dressed up. They're dressed up in costumes, right? And these costumes are designed to be dehumanizing. They're designed to be dehumanizing and to remove any kind of personalization or expression, and to render the person who is wearing them to be as a child, essentially. And you can just treat them like they're not a person anymore. You can just treat them like they're a subhuman that is beneath you because they're wearing this fucking dumbass monkey suit, right? And so, like, if my place of work were to suddenly, like, enforce a uniform or enforce a code, I'd probably leave. Like, straight up. I'd probably just be like, nah. Like, I don't think so, bro. But I worry it's going to happen because it's absolutely crucial for capitalism to enforce that sort of stuff on the workers, to continue to infantilize them, to continue to convince them that oh, you just need to listen to mommy and daddy. Mommy and daddy know best. Even as they, like, rip apart the entire system of capital and rip apart everything. So, these ones come from the Discord. Hold on, we got a loading thing going on here. I had to reset my computer because the internet thing. Dude, I worry about my internet. I worry that I'm getting throttled. Oh yeah, this is great. It's been revealed that CSIS is refusing to disclose records on NED activity and reveals that 2 more Canadian groups have taken NED money specifically to push Tibet separatism. Isn't that great? Isn't that absolutely wonderful? That we thought that the Tibet separatism narrative was going to be put to bed. That free Tibet was like, that's so 90s, right? Like, we all remember the 1990s where, like, Richard Gere was, like, all, like, free Tibet. Like, the actual narrative, and the Dalai Lama, right? The actual narrative of what was happening in Tibet is that Tibet was, like, a feudal theocracy. Serfs had an average lifespan of, like, 36. Like, I would already be dead in Tibet. Like, if I was a serf living in Tibet, I would already be dead, statistically. That the 40 more years that I have to look forward to being alive, like, no, that doesn't happen for you. And the life that you live is one of grueling, hard manual labor on behalf of a theocracy. Like the Dalai fucking Lama, who are all walking around being like, wow, he's so wise, but what a brilliant guy. The guy owned slaves. The guy was a slave owner. Like, this is what's so disgraceful about Western civilization, is that we venerate slaveholders and we venerate people who own slaves, like the kulaks, right? Like, the kulaks were maintaining a wage slave system, and we're all just like, what Stalin did to them was illegitimate. Like, oh, okay, so the Civil War, which is done to free the slaves, I guess is illegitimate, right? And I think there's a lot of people in America who are like, yeah, that's right. The Confederates were right. The free market decided, guys. The free market made a decision that the free market says that people need to own slaves. And so if you don't want to be a slave, then you better work really hard. And you know what? You better get slaves yourself. If you don't want to be a slave in a free market system, because the free market decides, And so anytime anybody says free Tibet, I think to myself, we did that. Like, well, we didn't. The Chinese did that, right? They did free Tibet. They went in there. They eliminated the feudal theocracy. They gave the serfs land. They gave the serfs the ability to actually own property. They let the serfs actually have, put their feet on the ground and actually earn something. But the entire narrative that apparently we're going to do part 2 of this. Apparently we're going to go in for a new Tibet separatism thing, because the NED is all about it, right? We got a free Tibet. free Tibet from who and give it back to who, right? we gotta make sure that we reinstitute slavery back on the Tibetans. That's essentially what we're saying. And people are gonna do it. We're gonna put up that, like, you're gonna change your Facebook profile to an old Tibetan flag. You're gonna see a bunch of Dalai Lama quotes floating around, right? We're gonna see all of this kind of shit because we're so fucking, like, we don't know anything. We're an illiterate people. We're essentially barbarians, right? Like, I have actually come to think of people like Jordan Peterson as barbarians. That sure, he talks well, but his entire theory is just everybody fend for themselves. And if you have a lot of power and money, then you're good. That's basically what we're saying. Yeah, slavery is alive and well in this capitalist world, absolutely. It's just become more hidden, and there are extra steps, right? That instead of it literally being like, I own a person, it's like, I own this institution which employs people in the society. And if they don't work for an institution such as this, they don't get food, right? So it's wage slavery. The Lincoln Republicans acknowledged that this system was wage slavery. That's what makes this so fucking crazy. Like, that's why I get, like, a little bit crazy talking to, like, liberals and like, libertarians and all this. It's like, literally the people who fought the Civil War in order to eliminate chattel slavery were talking about this very system that we currently live in today as slavery. That they said that it was wage slavery. And even the chattel slaves acknowledged that it was wage slavery. And they argued that chattel slavery was actually the superior of the two systems. That their argument for why chattel slavery was superior to wage slavery was that chattel slaves at least needed to be taken care of when you ran out of work, right? When there was no work to do, you still had to feed them and clothe them, right? And there were liberal movements all throughout that period of time that were all about, let's improve the quality of life of the slave, right? That slavery itself is not abhorrent. It's the treatment of the slaves that's abhorrent, right? This was like a classic liberal position during that period of time. I straight up lost my train of thought there. But it's just like, even the chattel slaves acknowledged that this system that we currently live under is wage slavery. And the difference is that instead of us being owned directly by a owner, like, instead of them directly owning us, they just own the institutions we're forced to work in. And if we don't work in those institutions, then we don't get food, we don't get shelter, right? Like, and once they no longer need us, right? Unlike chattel slavery, once they no longer need us, they can dispose of us, right? They can just be like, oh, we're out of work, we don't need to be part of this, we can just get rid of you, right? And they do that. Like, they do that. I've been laid off. Like, I've been dismissed from positions. Like, positions that I've been at for, like, 5 years. Like, I've been dismissed. Lots of people have. Lots of people have experienced this. It's just, you put a little smiling face on it. You say, we're all in this together, haha, while somebody steals your surplus value. And we're all supposed to pretend like this is a normal system for normal people, which you can go along with as long as you remain an infant in the way that you think. Grinning writes, but under wage slavery, you can be a slave to your preferred master, supposedly. The relationship stays the same, but you can change the faces. Yeah, woot. That, to me, that's no different than just saying, like, we should improve the quality of life for the slave. Like, if you want to improve the quality of your life, just find a better master, right? That's all you're really saying. So what the Civil War gained us, I suppose, was that you can leave one master for another, and that supposedly is improving things, although we're in a fairly major decline right now because we're refusing to do the thing that actually works, which is surround the halls of power and demand systemic change. we keep listening to total fucking barbarians and lunatics who are saying things like everything is about individual work. Like the only thing that matters is individualism. It's like, oh, so what do you think about the military? What do you think about the court system? Why do we even have universities and tax systems and any kind of system, right? Oh, it's because we believe that there is such a thing as collective action and collective need, right? Like, it's so bonkers to me that there is literally anyone walking around today saying that there is no such thing as a collective good. That there is just no such thing as an issue that matters to every single person and should be resolved. Like it's on the same level as believing like angels are real, but lots of people believe that, so let's just go along with it, I guess. And news from Toronto. John Tory wins third term as Toronto mayor. We all knew it. Like, we all knew it. There was no real upswell. And honestly, it's just the same story over and over again. Everyone's exhausted. No one has the capability to actually organize. Nobody has the finances. Nobody has the money. And the media is not going to actually talk to anybody. And the media is not actually going to present a case for anybody or allow anybody to present a case. There's not actually going to be a debate. There's not actually going to be any kind of system in place in order to allow the public to even know who anybody is or what they stand for, right? It really is just like, how much money do you have? And so, of course, John Tory's going to win, right? John Tory literally was sat on the board of directors for Rogers, right? Like, he's literally a corporate just stooge. That's literally who he is. He's just a corporate stooge. And the reason why I think people continue to just kind of bob their head along with John Tory is because he's like fairly inoffensive, right? Like he's just vanilla. He's just mayonnaise, right? And at this stage in the game, I just feel like people are kind of throwing their hands up and being like, who gives a fuck anymore, right? Who gives a fuck anymore? The only good Tory is a suppository. Andre. You keep that in the bedroom, friend. That's right. John, good to see you. It doesn't help the renminbi yuan in China just tumbled in the Forex market this week. Yeah, oh no. You know? Like, this is the thing. I just am like, oh no, the invisible money that doesn't matter. Oh no, like, remember when we were all like talking about how the ruble declined in his collapse? Oh my god, like a bunch of Westerners, rich people who are detached from reality in the first place are like, oh, my opinion of that is that it's bad. Like, yeah, okay. Like, do the citizens of China care? Does it actually matter for what's going on in terms of, like, building assets and building a stable society and having a country, right, that is stable and works for the benefit of everybody in itself? Like, these sorts of stories only make sense if you accept from the outset that financialization and the financial markets are legitimate, right? But I'm told by economists that undervalued currency is good, but I've never had it explained to me. Look, it's just a game of like shuffling money around, right? That is all it is. It's just a game of shuffling money around. And so if the value of a currency goes down, well, you buy that currency and then the value goes up, and so then you sell it for more, right? And and there are reasons why, like, China has in its history devalued its own currency on purpose, right? Because if you devalue your currency, it makes it more, it entices it to be purchased more, right? And if a bunch of Westerners buy $1 trillion worth of your currency because it's quote unquote undervalued, right? Well, then they can't really put that money elsewhere, and they're intertwined in your economy, right? Like, if America has $1 trillion of renminbis, then they're probably not going to go to war with China, right? Like if Bill Gates owns a major Chinese manufacturing base in China, he's probably going to be against the idea of going to war with China. That from China's perspective, like, China views currencies correctly, right? Like, we worship money here in the West. Like, we worship it. We genuinely think that money is God, and that if you have a lot of money, it's because you're a good person. Because we're childish, because we're children, right? We don't understand that money and money is just a tool. Like, it's just a fabrication. It's promissory notes. It's the promise of something. Like, that's the thing that I think is not well understood, is that money itself is not a thing. That it literally is the promise of a thing. And the big reason why the American economy is imploding and failing is that those promises are not going to be fulfilled, right? That the promise was always, oh yeah, sure, you can give us all the money because we're going to turn it around and trickle it back down into the economy. Well, that's not happening. So the promise is remaining unfulfilled. And the people who have all the money, we gobble on their cock and call them good, and when they're just scummy losers. And whereas the Chinese are like, yeah, money is a promise, and we're going to make good on that promise, right? We're going to build things. We're going to transfer it around. We're going to move it around. If it gets hoarded under a single umbrella, then we're going to shake that umbrella and we're going to spread it around, right? We're going to redistribute. We're going to create systems to actually take care, because we understand that money is just a tool. We don't worship it. We're not sitting here being like, oh my God, Jack Ma is the richest Chinese guy. He must be a god king that we all adore and love. We should give him control of our military, right? Like, why does Elon Musk have control of, like, Starlink? Like, why is there a satellite system that a billionaire has control in? Like, why is he part of the negotiation of access to information in Ukraine at all? Like, this is how delusional we are. This is how disconnected from reality we've become. That we're giving control of, like, crucial military infrastructure to just some billionaire because we worship money. Like, we worship it. And so we're sitting here going, well, we would never devalue the currency. We would never devalue our currency because money is good and holy and precious, and we want that to be as high as possible. We want a single dollar to be worth 1 billion, quadrillion, quadrillion won, or whatever, right? Whereas the Chinese are over there going, money's a tool. It's literally just a way to facilitate trade and a way to facilitate negotiations and a way to kind of keep track of, like, who is taking what from who. Right? It's a tracking tool. It's useful to a degree, right? And you can see that the Chinese understand that it's useful to a degree. That, like, it has gotten... Here's a situation it's gotten to all the time. It gets into this situation all the time. We are entering a country and we would like access to that country's cobalt, let's say, right? Lithium. You can pick anything. So for this example, let's just say cobalt. So we're going to walk into this country and be like, you've got cobalt. We want access to that cobalt. And the country goes, we don't have infrastructure for that. We don't have a road that's going to that section anyway. We don't have anything built there. And we're a poor country. Like, we are recovering from American colonialism. So, like, most of the world, right? And we just don't have the capacity to be able to build that, do that, any of that kind of stuff. And then China goes, well, what if we give you a loan, right? So we'll loan you a bunch of money. We'll give you a bunch of capital, right? We can get that road built. We can build the mine, right? And you can pay a lot of people. It'll inspire a lot of economic growth. not only will you have the road, you'll also have the mine, and you'll also have the infrastructure. And they do this with ports. They do this with the Chinese debt trap. Exactly how the West reports on this, right? Because, and then a situation occurs where they build the road, they build the mine, they start getting the cobalt, they start shipping the cobalt, and then they look at the numbers and all of the kind of stuff, and they go, "Hey, China, we're never going to be able to pay you that loan back. Like, we're never going to be able to pay you that loan back. We've worked it out, and we figured out, like, we can make money, and we are going to make money, but that loan, like, the interest on it, like, maybe we can pay the interest, but we'll never pay the bulk of the loan." And the Chinese solution is, yeah, don't worry about it. That's literally what they do. That's why the whole quote-unquote Chinese debt trap narrative is totally fake and totally bullshit. Because when the situation comes where a nation is looking at China and going, yeah, we can't pay the loan, it will put us in a debt trap situation where, like, we'll be essentially colonized by you for forever. China's solution is to forgive the loan. Because China got what it wanted. Right? China got what it wanted. It got the road, it got the mine, it's getting the cobalt. The cobalt's coming to China. Right? It's happening. It's happening. They don't also need to enslave these people, right? They're not Americans, because that's what the IMF does. That's what America does. That if America gives a loan and the IMF gives a loan, and then they turn around and they say, oh, hey, like, we're not able to turn around and actually pay this loan back, that the Americans go, fuck you, and then usually invade, foment a coup, right? Cause a lot of problems because money is real and we worship it and we're gods, right? That's literally the American position. And would you prefer to look at the world that way, or would you prefer to look at the world the way China does, where money, like, so they forgive the loan, so the money just goes because it wasn't real in the first place. Right? And the percentage of money in regards to their overall economy that they're forgiving is like a fraction of a percentage. So it's just like, it's just nothing. And they get everything they want. They get the resources, because that's what actually matters. Right? The resources are what actually matter. That the money is literally just, we wrote $10,000 on a sheet. 10,000 is what we gave you. It's here. See? We wrote it down. See? Well, we'll just cross that out. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So, who do you think is gonna, like, who would you prefer to deal with? Like, if you're Namibia or Zambia or Chile or Cuba or Venezuela or Brazil or Afghanistan, Iraq, like, if you're any of these countries, would you prefer to deal with the guy who, at the end of the conversation, when you look at them and say, okay, yeah, we aren't going to be able to pay that loan back, even though we got the mine, we got the infrastructure, we built all that kind of stuff, and then they go, yeah, don't worry about that. We're here for that. Like, we're here for the infrastructure. That's what we're playing. Would you prefer to deal with that guy, or would you prefer to deal with the guy of, like, oh, you can't pay the loan back? Well, here's some drones on you. We're gonna invade you and drop shit on you, and you're gonna pay that. You're gonna pay that 5,000 times over, and in 200 years we'll still be raping your land and taking shit out of your people. Which one of those two are you going to jump towards? Which one of those two are you going to really go for? Right? We got to stop with the money worship. We got to get over the money worship. And we got to start really disparaging people who hoard money and hoard wealth and hoard resources and treat money as if it is itself an object and something for us to venerate. Because it isn't. It strictly is not. And so to tie it all back into what you were kind of talking about, why would China devalue its own currency? Because it understands that it can manipulate it. It doesn't worship it. It understands that, like, oh, if we devalue the currency, then people will be more incentivized to purchase it. People will be more incentivized to invest in these regards and move resources around. And every time China does it, the West says the same thing. Oh, the disrespect. Oh, that's dirty play. Because they view money as an end in and of itself. They think that the Chinese are being disrespectful to the idea of money. It's like baby brain bullshit. Like, the Chinese are teaching the world how economics actually works. The Chinese took Marxist principles and using Marxian economics and the scientific study of economics through Marxian lens, and they're continuously improving on it and experimenting with it and moving towards it. And they're showing the rest of the world what economics actually is, right? And embarrassing these Westerners. They're just embarrassing the West. Just flat out, hands down. Like, they are making us look like religious acolytes because that's exactly what we are. I went to school from computer science, not economics. Come back to me when you have a network computer issues. Fantastic. Yuan is 0.14 down from 0.16 in May. Not really a collapse. 13% is a bit more than a correction, though. I mean, again, though, like, it's like we're looking at a flash in the pan moment in a system that doesn't exist in the first place. Like, for real, like, who gives a fuck? Like, China's building rail, building road, building up its military capacity, building its renewable energy system, building. Like, that's what China's doing. Oh no, its currency went down 13% for a week. Oh. Tinker, good to see you, bud. Yeah, Elon Musk, the biggest con in modern history. I mean, part of the thing that Elon Musk, like, he thinks his own shit smells good. Like, he believes his own bullshit, right? He believes it. So that's what makes him extra ridiculous. Yeah, China doesn't coup countries. China doesn't send jackals to assassinate leaders. China doesn't sanction entire countries to starvation. If you ask China to leave, they will leave and go somewhere else. And they understand that the entire point of talking to one another as nations is to build positive relationships with each other in the hopes that you can have what the Chinese themselves call win-win diplomacy. Right? They're really not interested because they see how it fails. They see how it fails, and it does. It fails. You don't get what you want, right? You don't get what you want if you act this way on the world stage. You don't get what you want. You end up just pissing everybody else off. You don't really get the resources you need. You end up wasting a lot of the resources you're attempting to get. In the effort to get it anyway, and you know, maybe for a 10-year period or a 20-year period you might get it. It might happen for you, but it'll eventually be depleted, and then your relationship with the country that you have enslaved is definitely going to be in the negatives for a long fucking time, right? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, people don't forget that shit. They don't just forget the enslavement of their population by Nazis. Ukraine is a World Bank, USA debt trap, yet they will pay NATO back every penny with interest. Yeah, I mean, they're paying for it in their blood. That's what they're really paying for it, right? Yeah, if the Chinese debt trap was a real thing, why can't the West just do a better job at making better deals than China? Yeah. Like, that's just like... That's the thing that's so... If the yuan dropped below 0.12, that would be serious. But I think what I'm driving towards, Grinning, is that it would only be serious for us. Like, I mean, certainly the Chinese would be like, oh yeah, okay, right? But we're the only ones that would be like hair on fire about it, right? Like, we're the ones that worship money. Like, for the Chinese, they're literally like, that's just a measure. This is just a measurement that we are applying into the world, and that's the measure of it. We're the ones that worship it, right? Like, we're the acolytes. For the Chinese, like, if the yuan dropped below, like, 0.12, they're still going to be building roads. They're still going to be building infrastructure. They're still going to be focusing on their citizens. They're still going to be doing that shit. The shit that actually matters, right? Like this hyper-focusing on where the value of the yuan is at. I'm not trying to say it doesn't matter. but I am trying to deprioritize it in the algorithm of your brain. That it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Like, it really doesn't. Like, it's not this enormous, oh my god, the communist regime is gonna fall and the people are gonna go starving and all. Like, no. The resources are still moving. The Chinese citizens are fine. Right? Like, it just matters to us. Because we're the ones that have gone ahead and invested so much into this idea that the money mattered. Right? So if you're a Western capitalist and you buy 1 million shares of some communist thing, and then the communists stand up and say, we're going to intentionally devalue that, that matters to you. So if you're a parasite, that matters to you. But if you're like a worker or a citizen of the country, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't really understand how it matters to you. Like, if it, maybe it literally makes prices go down. Like, oh no. Not true when you Forex, it matters very much. I'm sure that's an attempt at a joke, bud. Of course, these econ people will be hyper-focused on the line on the graph. Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing they've ever done. Right? Forget about people's living standards, right? Forget about the lived experience of the citizens, right? Is 0.12 is below 2005 levels when China was locking their currency to the USD. It would show a failure of their policies of banking liberalization. Would it? Like, for real though, like, would it? Like, 0.12 is below. So there was a point when China was locking their currency to the USD, and now they're not doing that anymore. Right now they're buying up a lot of gold, buying up a lot of hard assets, right? Because they're anticipating war, and they're anticipating a collapse of the dollar. They're anticipating an end of the American empire, and so they're trying to position themselves in the future so that when we enter this incredibly tumultuous phase, like, the collapse of the dollar and the end of the dollar as the reserve currency is going to be absolute chaos. Like, it's going to be absolute chaos. Like, you think that the yuan dropping a couple of percentage points is going to be chaos? Like, the shit that's coming down the path where the United States is no longer going to be considered. Because here's the game that the United States has been able to play. Right? The game that the United States has been able to play has literally been, oh, if Venezuela wants to trade with Peru, right, then they must trade on this international market. If they want to trade bananas for oil, right, well, they've got to trade on this market, and we get a cut. You got to make that trade in dollars. And if you don't make that trade in dollars, then the trade's illegitimate, and we'll send a military in after you, right? So it's essentially a tax on nations trading with one another, and the Americans get a whole bunch of money for doing fucking nothing, right? But the Americans have, through their parasitical monetary system, they have inserted themselves into all international trade organizations, and they get free money for fucking nothing. And most of the world is going like, yeah, I'd like that to stop. I'd like to have, like, why are we paying these worthless people anything? Why are we giving anything to these Americans? For the pleasure of what? Using their quote-unquote international monetary fund, right? Using their international monetary system. Right? There's no fucking credibility in any of this. There's no credibility in any of this. And the entire American system is predicated on the existence of that system. It's predicated on the very existence of that system. That the idea that, oh, we can literally fund an entire military force on this idea, and it's going to end. It's going to end, and the reason why it's going to end is because literally any option is emerging. Like, literally any other country with any other heft or any other weight is emerging and saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. You guys want to trade banana for oil? You go ahead. Like, I cannot emphasize, I say it all the time on this channel, I cannot emphasize how fast a lot of this shit's gonna happen. Like, a lot of this shit that's going to happen is going to happen so fucking swiftly that it's going to take us 10 years to figure out what happened in the year that all of this shit went down. Right? It's going to be that quick. And one of the major things that is going to happen is that the Americans are going to not be able to afford their military anymore. Like, they're just not going to be... Money is not going to go to any military adventurism anymore. It's going to end. And it's going to happen like fucking that. Because the American economy and the entire concept of the American... like, the American global economy, it's just going to... Entire sections of the global south, including China, including India... Right? The BRICS, all these guys, they're just going to stop using these international trading funds and these international trading institutions. They're just going to be like, nah, that's cool, right? We're not going to interact with that anymore. And the whole thing is just going to go poof in a minute. And the Americans are just going to be left with a cock in their hands. And they're not going to know what to do. And so all of these military forces, like you think about like, the military forces in Ukraine, Iraq, Yemen, Palestine. Like, a lot of the reason why the concentration camp of Palestine and Yemen exist is because of the perpetual funding that's coming out of the United States. And it's going to end. And it's going to end all at once. There's going to be a retraction of the empire. And the empire is just going to go... Hoo-ah! Right? Because that's what happens when empires die and when the trade routes... calcify, and when everything blows right up, right? No, broccoli. Like, I'm not trying to say the Americans won't attempt to fund it, but like, how are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to get the money? Nobody in the world is going to trade on the dollar, right? They're going to move to other currencies. They're going to move to other things if they have the opportunity to do so. We already see it happening. So the whole idea of getting a ton of free money from other people's trade is over for the American empire, right? Nobody is interested in trading with the Americans. Nobody's interested in creating trade organizations, especially while there's another nation that's actually trying to do trade legitimately, right? Or any other organizations that are actually attempting to build anything stable out there. Like, BRICS looks good right now. Like, if I'm a place like Argentina, like if I'm a place like Brazil, a place like Zambia, am I thinking, boy howdy, I gotta get really invested in this IMF thing? Yeah, the Gates Foundation has been really working out for people. Or am I looking at BRICS and am I looking at China and being like, hey, yeah, like how do I get into that, right? And so that's all going to blow up for the Americans. And then they've eroded their own tax base so completely that they can't extract any more wealth out of their own people because they've impoverished them so effectively, right? And they're never going to tax the billionaires, right? The billionaires own the government, right? So the military must, by definition, by like 1 + 1 =, it must contract. It can't do anything else, right? It's just gonna be, and they'll try. Like, they're gonna try a lot of dumb shit, right? They're gonna try, and they'll fail, because they've run out of road. They've run out of road. They can't exist on credit anymore because nobody believes them anymore. They've lost their credibility. Nobody thinks the Americans are actually interested in building anything. Nobody thinks the Americans are actually interested in facilitating anything, creating anything on the world stage, right? That the Americans are done. Like, they have no ideas, they have no thoughts, and for real, like, I'm the leader of a small country like the Congo. Let's take a look at the last 20 years of history between America. Forget about hundreds of years. Forget about that. Let's look at the last 20 years of history. China, America. I know which one I'm picking. Like, and it's not a choice, honestly. Like, it isn't a choice. Like, it's the difference between, like, a drunk idiot in a boat screaming about how he was amazing 50 years ago, and just a normal guy being like, "Hey, I got some I got some bananas. Do you want some? We'd like your papaya." That's what it is. Like, just like the difference between like kind of normal looking, sort of stable, and just like a ridiculous, like high on fentanyl, shooting guns into the air, screaming about how trans people are bad. Like, yeah, not a tough choice. Like, not a tough choice. Like, well, and on top of all of that, the American, like, because the Americans are going to get more desperate, because they see that they're losing their prestige, right? They see that let's make America great again, right? Like all this kind of stuff. They are articulating their own decline, and their insistence is that we can reclaim that lost prestige. We can reclaim it somehow. So they're going to get more desperate, which is only going to accelerate it. Because they're going to do stupid shit. Like, really, they're going to do just dumb, idiotic, moronic, stupid shit. Like the Ukraine war, the Donbass war, right? This is as dumb fuckery as it can get. Like, it doesn't get stupider than what you're seeing here. That if you wanted the American empire to fall into a faster decline, Ukraine war is exactly the way to do it. Alienate everybody. Alienate the Russians, alienate the Chinese, alienate the Indians, alienate the entire global south, alienate your own partners in Europe, right? Create an energy crisis, create a massive credibility crisis, and then in the end, by the way, incidentally, asterisks, lose the fucking war. Like, that's the best part. That's the part that should have any leftists just like shaking their head, being like, "Oh my god, I can't even believe they didn't even win." They spent all their credibility, lost all of their positioning, had a bunch of people literally draw a line. And the Americans themselves, what do you think sanctioning is? Right? Sanctioning is literally drawing a line on the sand and saying, "You're over there and we're over here. That we're not trading with you." And we're going to blockade you, and we're going to make sure that you can't trade, and all that kind of stuff, right? That we're drawing a line in the sand. Well, if you draw a line in the sand around everybody, you're the isolated one, right? And that seems to be something that America just simply cannot compute in its brain. That if you sanction every other nation, you're the isolated one. And they're just doing it. They're just doing it. And this winter is going to be absolutely catastrophic for Europe. That we're going to see enormous shifts in the political landscape. It's going to happen extremely fast. Not to mention the shit that's going down in like the UK, where looks like the Conservatives are going to plane out, right? That they're not going to do a general election. They're literally going to appoint a Goldman Sachs executive and basically just trundle along as if they still have any credibility whatsoever, while the people of the UK literally freeze or spend all their money to not. Like, expect enormous shit to happen throughout Europe. It's already happening, but come January, February, like, and then definitely the spring, like, expect some crazy shit to go down throughout Europe. And we're just no longer and the Americans seem no longer interested in trying to stop any of this, right? They really are, like, their only position seems to be destroy it, just destroy it. Like, if we can't own it, then we should just destroy it. And it seems to be their whole strategy in Ukraine. That if we can't own Russia, then we should just destroy Russia, and this is our strategy for how to do that. And it's turning out to be a complete failure. Like, it's turning out to be a complete and total failure. And all of their theories about being able to engage in a war like this without escalation to nuclear combat are being put to the test. And we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. Yeah, Isabella Gump got 1,151 votes for the mayoral race in Toronto. That tells you something. And there's a lot of candidates. I shouldn't completely disparage what happened in this election, because there were a lot of candidates who got like a smattering of votes here and there. And it does indicate that there is an energy that is building. It just needs to get focused. And we've got a whole media apparatus that's standing against us, that did everything it could to make sure that nobody knew anybody else, right? I voted for a guy who went full ACAB in the televised debate for my local mayoral race. He didn't win. We got the guy I expected. Yeah. No, of course. Like, because how many people actually saw this televised debate, right? Like, if you ask me, like, oh, it turns out that giving the media to 3 people was a bad idea, right? It turned out that letting 3 people have charge of what we see and what we hear is a total bad idea, right? Von Schwingener, how dare you start nuclear, comrade? Nuclear. 6 candidates did worse. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, the disability issue, like, the disability issue is so obvious. Like, it's so obvious at this point. Like, really? Your position is that we should abandon the disabled. Like, ugh. Ugh. Minnesota has a governor candidate named Jack Sparrow. Fantastic. So, what I love about this article, and the only reason I'm bringing it up, BC NDP shreds its credibility again with Appaduare disqualification. Canadian Dimension, catching up with the Canadian commie. That's all. That's the whole reason I wanted to talk about this, is to just pat myself on the back, be like, I already made a video about this, guys. Me, just link to my YouTube video. I don't need to read this. I already did the video. Right? By intervening in the leadership election in favor of Eby and then refusing to reveal the names of the executives who voted to disqualify Appaduare, the BC NDP has confirmed the criticism that it is an indolent party adverse to truly democratic grassroots input. A recent CTV News headline summarizes the secretive, anti-democratic nature of their actions this election. NDP not releasing names of executives who decided BC's next premier. Yeah. Like, the entire system is discrediting itself. That the only reason at this stage in the game for us to be engaging in electoral politics is to highlight how it no longer has credibility. Because, like, let's take somebody like Isabella. Like, let's say Isabella was suddenly getting, like, a bunch of support, and there was all of this energy surrounding her, and even the news media was starting to notice and be like, who is this person? And let's talk about it. Like, you're telling me that Rogers and Telus and Bell and the developers and the billionaire class, the oligarchy, like David Thompson, you're telling me that they're just going to do nothing? You're telling me they're just going to sit there and be like, well, the people have spoken, you know? You think that that's what's going to happen? No. They're obviously going to do something. They're obviously going to do something to chase people out of the system. We're seeing it right here. And so my opinion is that, yeah, we definitely need to be involved in the electoral system. We definitely need to be building power, but not in order to seize it, because they'll never let us have electoral power, but in order to illustrate to the populace over and over and over and over and over and over and over again that the system itself is fraudulent. That it no longer has credibility. Like, that's how I want and how I think communists and socialists should be talking about electoral politics. That people voting, people will never be able to vote out fascists. Like, they'll never allow it. They'll do away with voting before they allow that to happen. And the entire purpose of us engaging in the electoral system should not be with the hope and the dream that we'll vote the fascists out, but with the express reality and the express understanding that the reason why we're doing it is to illustrate how bereft of credibility this system actually is. That, yeah, everybody support me and watch me lose anyway. Like, I really, like, I think part of the reason why we get in trouble is because we're sitting there being like, man, and then we'll win. No, you won't. You never. Never. The capitalists will literally start assassinating people before that starts happening. Like, literally. Like, people will go to jail. They will absolutely hire patsies in order to assassinate people and then send them to, like, cushy places and then probably shoot those guys too. Like, literally it will go down like that. They don't give a fuck. Like, they don't give a fuck. And so, and I think it's terrible for the morale of the left. I think it's terrible for the morale of communists and socialists to be like, yeah, we'll gain power and seize it electorally, because you'll always lose. And then when the capitalists do something underhanded and shitty, you'll go, oh, they did something underhanded and shitty. Like they do. 100% of the time. Like, expect it, articulate that expectation. When they do it, be like, yeah. Like, look, the thing that I said that they were going to do, they did. Like, we shouldn't be running with the goal of seizing power, because electoral politics will never facilitate that. We should be running with the objective of shining a light on the lack of credibility that the system has, and funneling the energy that's coming into the electoral system to surround the halls of power. That's what we should actually be doing. That any interaction we have with the electoral system should be done exclusively to illustrate how fraudulent it is. And that's it. Because the true power move for communists and socialists is surrounding the halls of power. And I don't think mandatory voting would change anything. Like, I don't think mandatory voting would change a thing. For real. Like, I think you'd end up with pretty much the same results. Yeah, the NDP is no longer a legitimate federal party. They've been bought out by corporate elite capitalist sociopaths. Yeah, well, and they're not legitimate in BC, right? And like people like Rachel Notley in Alberta are essentially just like, you know, oil companies with smiling faces. Like, it's basically what's going on. Yep, democracy is over. Capitalism has eaten it away. Only option is to surround the halls of power with civil disobedience. But we need the masses to get desperate enough for that to happen. Yeah, capitalism will ensure that. Like, it'll definitely ensure that. Take a look at what's take a look at what's already happening in France. Like, to be fair, the French have a history of protest. They've got a culture of protest. Anemone, good to see you. Like, they've got a history of that. But they're not, but I don't think they're going to be particularly unique as we head into the winter. Like, I think a lot of people are sort of, even today, are still kind of crossing their fingers and hoping this will all shake out. Hoping that the very people who are responsible for generating the crises will suddenly have a come to Jesus moment and stop generating the crises. It's not going to happen, right? But a lot of people are still sort of crossing those fingers and hoping it will actually work out that way. And it won't. It literally won't. And the system of capital itself will, like, it's I say it all the time, right? It's not our job to convince people that things have gone wrong, right? It's not our job to convince people that communism is a superior idea. Right? It's not our job to convince people that capitalism no longer has credibility. Capitalism's going to do all of that for us. We could spend 30 years trying to convince people, and capitalism will get it done for us in a year. So our goal is simply to articulate good ideas, and continue defending those good ideas, so that when it becomes obvious that we need new ideas, we're in place to implement those ideas, or to enforce the implementation of those ideas, right? Like, our role is not to convince anybody. And it's because ostensibly I think many people do agree with us, right? The question is no longer, well, is paying for people's education good, right? Like, most people actually agree with that we should do something about the university system. We should do something about the student debt system, right? Most people think that, and the people who don't are insane. Like, angels are real. And so the question isn't that it's not that they don't agree with us, it's how do we implement it? And that's the struggle we're actually having now. And when the system of capital reveals itself to even the most illiterate Luddite that it has no credibility left, then people are going to be looking for someone and looking for people with ideas. And that needs to be us. So we need to continuously articulate good ideas and solid thoughts and have them ready. That's our job. Our job is not to spread the good word of communism. Our job is to have our ideas ready to go, so that when the populace turns its eye in its desperation, it has something to look at. It'll happen. We need to be more like France and surround the halls. Yeah, screw Trudeau and his emergency powers. Yeah. Yeah, the liberal defense of the emergency powers is, like, really, really fucking weird. It's really weird, man. Like, it has a detachment about it. Like, it's got this weird kind of detachment where, like, yeah, we absolutely needed to declare emergency powers on a handful of truckers because they had road flares. Like, that's really what it's going to come down to. And it's really weird, man. Like, it's really weird. Breaking news, George R. Martin confirms he's three-fourths done with Winds of Winter. 3 more years. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. He's never going to finish that book series. He'll die before that happens. Brandon Sanderson will finish it. That's what's going to happen. Like, George R. Martin, he'll finish this book. And then, what is this, the 6th book? And so that means there's 1 more book left? Yeah, he'll die before it's done. And then Brandon Sanderson will finish it. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, the Corpo Party. Yep. Andrew Horvath won the Hamilton mayoral race by a huge margin, only because of name recognition. Also, I gotta tell you, like, I think that's a better place for her. Like, I do. I think that's just a better place for her. Like, I don't dislike Andrea Horvath. She seems like a really nice substitute teacher, you know? Like, she seems like a nice person. I don't see her as, like, a visionary. I don't think she has, like, that much chutzpah behind her, you know? But I think she'll be a fine mayor, you know? So that's probably already the position. I think he's already done and wants it released upon his death as a big FU to all the people saying he's going to die before finishing it. Maybe. I don't know, dude. Guys, you guys know me. Like, I'm completely disconnected from any of this. Like, I got a big ol', like, who gives a fuck about this now? Like, really. Like, I just don't actually care about that story anymore. You know? It's how I feel about, like, Star Trek and Star Wars and like, all of this stuff. Like, I just don't think it's gonna actually amount to anything or matter. Or it's like this Amazon Rings of Power that got released. It's like, yeah, I mean, watch it. You know, go ahead. Spend some hours, like, while away some hours with some, like, beautiful people and, like, talking like this about, well, if the Ring of Mordor has we must pursue the end of the Gowron age of the men of the following of the Orcan. You're like, if that's what you want, great. Like, awesome. You're gonna forget about it the minute you watch it. That's the reason why all these stories suck, right? That's the reason why all these stories suck, is because the minute you exit the theater or the minute you turn off the TV, you forget it. Because it never mattered. It didn't have an impact on you. It was basically just like pretty lights. You know? And from like a like aesthetically pleasing like perspective, okay. Like there's nothing wrong with it. And definitely it's beautiful. Like beautiful people, right? Like Galadriel swimming in an ocean, right? I'm sure it's a very beautiful shot. Like the mountains, like New Zealand, the architecture, the costumes, like all of that kind of stuff. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I'm not trying to discount any of that. And like if that's how you want to spend your time, right? Watching like, you know, a beautiful art piece like that, that's great. But as soon as it's over, and you're going to forget about it, and you're just going to move away and go do something else, because it has no, there's nothing actually there, right? There's nothing actually there, that it's not about anything, right? That like it's supposed to be about like the ascension of Sauron, right? And that's what the story is. It's about the ascension of Sauron. It's like, yeah, but who cares? Like who cares about the ascension of Sauron? Right? Everything these days is about the cult of the self and is about the cult of personality. And I'm supposed to get really invested in this story because it's about this character. Where did this character come from? Well, I don't care. Like I don't care. Like why do I give a shit at all where Sauron came from? Right? And in my opinion, it makes the story weaker. Like the story of part of the reason why the story of the Lord of the Rings is effective as a story is because the power of Mordor and the power of Sauron is mysterious. And it has this kind of like very looming and powerful and faceless authority behind it, where and the heroes are so ill-equipped and so incapable of confronting this magnanimous, this overwhelming darkness that's just looming right behind our view, right? And so like telling a story about how like, well, yeah, Sauron used to be a man who really liked girls, and then that he saw this chance to seize power. It just kind of makes him like this petty fucking loser. Fuck the TV show, but the Silmarillion one is incredible. Love it. I haven't seen anything about this. I didn't even like. Did they do the like? I don't pay attention to this shit, dude. Because I don't think they're actually capable of telling these stories anymore. Like I don't think they're capable storytellers. Straight up. Like, I just don't think they. I just don't think that these like when I listen to the nerds talking about this nerd shit, I'm like, it just sounds like people who are desperate to make this have meaning, and it doesn't actually have anything to. There's nothing there, because it's not. In the end, these stories aren't about anything. They're not about anything. Right? Like, Lord of the Rings is a story that is about something. Right? It is about the power of good defeating evil, and how even a small amount of goodness can ascend and face down the darkest evil and defeat it. And that all it takes for evil to be defeated is for good men to stand up and say no. And about the power of friendship, and about the power of a fellowship, and the dedication of good people to stand up against darkness, right? Like, these new stories are about fucking nothing. They're about like I'm supposed to really get invested in like, oh well, and then Galadriel stood here and said these words, and then that's where the rings came from, and I'm literally like, yeah, who gives a shit? Who cares? Right? Like, go back and watch some of the old Star Trek movies, right? The Wrath of Khan. The Wrath of Khan is a brilliant movie. It is a brilliant movie that everybody should rewatch, because It's about vengeance, and it's about the struggle of vengeance, and the failing of vengeance, and why vengeance fails, right? That humans are only motivated by three things ultimately, right? Vengeance, power, and love. And don't say like money, because money is power, right? Like if and the stories that are being presented are about nothing. They're not about power, they're not about love, they're not about vengeance. They're just literally just about a character and the series of events he experiences. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and that blows up, and then the credits roll. It's just like, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? And that's another thing, actually, John, that you're bringing up, is like, I don't trust these guys. I don't trust these guys at all, because they're like, Star Wars is the case in point for this. Like, when Disney bought Star Wars, I had this like little fleeting moment inside of my chest, just inside of my heart, that was like, oh my god, Disney bought Star Wars? Oh shit, there's literally 60 years. There's 60, is it 60? Is it, whatever, 50 years of content. Books, graphic novels, fan fictions, games, video games that have been created in the Star Wars universe. There is this, like, enormous depository of literature that has been created within the Star Wars fan base and has been maintained and, like, treasured and petted by a community of people who literally have conventions about it. Who, like, if you were in one of the Star Wars movies as an extra standing in the background, you get to sit in a panel discussion and people actually give a shit what happens to your life. Like, these people really fucking care. And they really fucking care about this shit. And there's all of this fucking lore and stories that have been told. And Disney literally looked at all of that, all of these treasures that they were just bestowed upon and that they paid for. They were given access to the treasure trove, and they just pushed it all aside and went, nah, we can do better than that. And then they just shit out this garbage, right? All of the Disney Star Wars shit is trash. Trash. Like, irredeemable. Like, maybe Rogue One. Maybe you can look at Rogue One and be like, that was at least a decent story. That had a kind of a point, you know, and a goal, right? Like, these movies are horribly bad. Horribly bad. And like, betray everybody. Like, literally, if their goal was to betray everybody, I don't think they could have been more effective at it. And the fact that they're doing it while ignoring this, it's as if they like opened up a magical cave of wonders and walked into the cave, and there were all of these treasures around everywhere and gold and all this kind of stuff. And they thought to themselves, yeah, we don't need to take any of this stuff. In fact, what I'm going to do is take a shit in the middle of the floor, put a spotlight on it, put a little title on it, and be like, Disney. And that'll be our contribution. Like, yeah, Disney stuffing out all the Star Wars expanded universe is a fucking crime against literature. Yeah. And if you ask me, it's not actually going to work. Like, I actually believe this. That Disney's attempt to destroy Star Wars will fail. That the people who actually like Star Wars, the people who actually are invested in Star Wars, will not allow it to happen. That the base, the base of the Star Wars fan base will keep that shit alive until all of these people are dead. And the next generation of Star Wars fans will keep it alive. And until finally maybe some Disney executives go, why the fuck don't we make these and make $1 billion? Like, that's the part of it that's so embarrassing. Like, I think they could have made way more money by just, like, take this book and film it. What's wrong with you? Yep, the Star Wars Expanded Universe had 30 years of material, over 100 years in universe, like after the original trilogy. Yeah, turns 0 to 100 really fucking quick, gets Game of Thrones really fast. Yeah, and it's a good story. Like, I used to be a Star Wars nerd, like, and I used to have people around me who were, like, super Star Wars nerds. Like, I know, it's good shit. And the shit they're producing now, like, that's why I'm just like, if Disney owns it, I'm just not gonna watch it. Like, it's like, maybe it'll be pretty, right? Like, maybe it'll be pretty, but, like, I don't care. It just doesn't matter to me anymore. And it should actually stop mattering to everybody. Like, that, you want to talk about how to destroy institutions like Disney, right? You want to know how to do it? Just stop watching their shit. Just completely stop. That, like, don't pay attention to it. Don't turn it on. Don't look at it. When they announce a remake of your childhood shit, just be like, and move on with your life. Go do literally anything else. Go watch a story that somebody is making on YouTube. Go watch a TikToker. Go watch. Go try to find somebody else who's actually a credible storyteller somewhere, right? Go read a book that's being published that's being self-published by some person on, like, the Amazon Prime bookstore, who's saying, this is my third installment of my trilogy, and I'm really hoping that you like it, because it's going to be better. There's going to be more to it, right? Like, go pursue things that are being made out of people's hearts. Go pursue something. Go try to find something that's actually being made because somebody believes in it and loves what they're doing, right? Ignore these people. Just literally do not give them your money. Stop giving your money to these people, because all they can do is betray you. That they're not interested in telling good stories. They're not interested in telling credible anything. They're not interested in trying to improve your life. They're not interested in trying to create. They're not even interested in trying to create, like, moral stories anymore. Like what they fucking did to Pinocchio. Like, fuck you. Like, fuck you. Right? Pinocchio is a story about why it's bad to lie. That's it. That's the whole fucking story. The story is about what makes a good person, and how does a person move from being, like, a fake person to being a real boy, right? And the lesson that Pinocchio learns through the journey it is about self-sacrifice and about why it's important to tell the truth. And they literally just distill from it all of it. So Pinocchio never learns anything. And it's just a series of events that occurs. Because the people who are telling these stories simply do not understand that part of what makes a story good is that the protagonist has flaws. Like, and that's just fundamentally the truth. That if the protagonist doesn't have flaws, then they can never overcome them. And also, if the protagonist doesn't have flaws, we don't like, they're not real, and we know they're not real. Rey from Star Wars is not real. Like, that's why we all hate her, and she sucks, right? And of course, Disney's defense is, well, you're just a misogynist. That's the reason why they're doing all of this, by the way. The reason why they're doing race and gender switching and all this kind of stuff is so that they can say to people who have legitimate critiques, you're just a misogynist and a bigot and a racist, and that's their whole defense, right? And if you don't enjoy our stuff, it's because you're a racist. It's like, no, it's because your characters are fake, and they suck. Like, Rey sucks. She's the worst character ever put to film. Like I can't I don't think I can think of a worse character than Rey. She has no flaws. She's perfect from the outset. She learns nothing. She makes no decisions. Like nothing she does matters. She's just literally like a little Jesus Christ icon that just gets put places, and then things happen to her, right? But nothing she says matters. Nothing, like the scenes could still happen without her most of the time. It's just like she's pointless. She's pointless. That's Han Solo just because they gave in to Harrison Ford? What are you talking about, dude? There's 1,000 years of in-universe material, Old Republic, Sith, Infinite Empire. I had no idea Del Toro made a Pinocchio. What are you talking about, dude? Del Toro made a Pinocchio? Del Toro's really good, by the way. Del Toro Pinocchio? Oh, it's like really new. Oh, shit. Now I'm really, really interested. Dude, I'm super interested in this. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm literally gonna watch this, like, after this stream. This looks fucking interesting as shit. Look, Pinocchio is, one of the most, one of the things that's really convinced me that Disney's lost the thread and lost their artistic credibility is that they don't even care about the visuals anymore. Right? Like the original Pinocchio, Disney original Pinocchio whale. Like this movie was a masterpiece. Like this movie was an absolute masterpiece. And the scenes and the shots that you see in it are absolute, like it's a living painting that intertwines itself with legitimate storytelling for a purpose. And I'm really trying to whale crashing or wave. Like this sequence right here, where the whale is crashing through the water. Right? It's fucking hand drawn. Like, it's brilliant. It's breathtaking. It's beautiful. And when they do this scene with CGI, it's literally just hacky bullshit. Like, who cares? Like, it looks worse than fucking VeggieTales. Like, Harrison Ford had his Han Solo appearance held hostage as long as they killed him off. Like how he originally wanted back in the 80s, and so people could leave him alone. Ford hates playing Solo. That's so funny. Like, what a weirdo Harrison Ford is, dude. Like, what a weirdo. Like, he literally lands, like, Star Wars as, like, a carpenter or something. You know who's breathtaking? Keanu. Yeah. Keanu Reeves' TikTok is the funniest shit I've ever seen. It's the funniest shit I've ever seen. He literally just does stuff that like other TikTokers do. But because it's him, it's funnier. I just don't know how to express it. Like he just like takes a tea bag and he's like, when you get a new girlfriend, and he just like takes the tea bag out of the sink and like puts it in the garbage can while looking at you, and it's just like in the garbage can, and that's it. He's just illustrating like, yeah, you're when you get a new girlfriend, your activities change. And if it was just some person, you might be like, huh, but it's Keanu Reeves, and so you're just like, okay, all right. And incidentally, talking about somebody who has like a charmed life. Like, Keanu, are you kidding me? Keanu Reeves is living, like, this dream life. He's living a life that I think people would, like, play video games about. Like, if somebody made a game called Keanu Reeves the video game and let you live the life that Keanu Reeves lived, I think a lot of people would play that game. I think that would be very, very popular. Anyway, I just went down, like, a whole fucking, like, rabbit hole of talking about Disney again. Yeah. Yeah, let's shift gears. Let's shift gears away from Disney into Nazism. How about that? Germany withholding a tweet showing Azov fighters in Ukraine doing the Hail Hitler salute on the basis of the law against Nazi symbols is an amazing irony. The German government can fund and arm them, but journalists can't show photos of them proudly exhibiting their white supremacy. It's a really beautiful moment. This is a really beautiful moment that Lindsay Snell is illustrating, that she puts a picture of Azov soldiers doing Nazi salutes, and the tweet gets withheld in Germany based on the local laws. Germany is funding these people. So Germany can fund Nazis, but you can't show them, which I feel works to the benefit of the Nazis in Germany, right? That you can't show the Nazis. And so the citizens can never see that who they're funding are fucking Nazis. That's the same fucking shit. Fuck you. Oh yeah. Here's a good one. One homeless death every 2 days in Toronto. Social murder for capitalist profits. The death toll of the housing crisis. In Toronto, a homeless person dies every 2 days. This number is nearly double what it was 3 years ago, showing that the problem is getting worse. It would be naive to assume these numbers aren't in fact higher, as it's difficult to calculate just how many people are living on the streets. And not all homeless deaths are reported as such, including those who die in hospitals and emergency rooms. It's no mystery why this is happening in a city where it takes 9.9 times the median wage to purchase a median home. Property values continue to be driven up artificially, not by any new value added to them, but because the housing market is treated as a casino for capitalists to play their luck at. This pushes people out of the market, leaving them unable to afford a basic need: shelter. Social murder. Over half of these deaths are due to drug toxicity. That is, the drug supply that people are being tainted or are poisoned. This makes the spike in homeless deaths just one of the horrific consequences of the general opioid crisis that Canada is facing. It is no surprise that the most vulnerable are feeling the effects of this problem the most severely. While there are some harm reduction supports in a number of shelters across Toronto, these are like using a Band-Aid to treat a bullet wound. Ultimately, drug use is a way to cope with the horrible conditions and survive the day-to-day struggle of being out on the streets. So long as people are pushed into miserable conditions of homelessness, there will be a need to turn these drugs as a way to these drugs as a way to escape reality. Tackling drug use on its own doesn't actually address the problem that is leading to the drug use in the first place: the poverty and homelessness created by capitalism. The youth are particularly hit hard by homelessness, with students dealing with raising tuition rates on top of the rent and cost of living crisis. In fact, before the pandemic even hit, a Toronto shelter reported that 1/3 of its residents were students, one being a computer science major at the University of Toronto and his high school's valedictorian. This is a Canada-wide problem. On the West Coast, 11% of British Columbia's homeless population are below the age of 25, and 40% of University of British Columbia students report low to very low food security. The homelessness crisis is a problem that impacts all levels of society, though the capitalists benefit from it, while the workers and youth are left to starve. Blame for the spike in death rate rests on the total inadequacy of the system to support homeless people. Of the 216 homeless people who died in 2021, 132 were living in shelters. These shelters are chronically underfunded, overcrowded, and unsafe. It is not at all uncommon for outbreaks of flu and illnesses to occur. The limited resources and miserable conditions are a breeding ground for fights and violence as well. As homeless advocates point out, it is the policies of the city that create unsafe conditions for homeless people, conditions that lead to their deaths. This is social murder, which Frederick Engels, co-author of the Communist Manifesto, explained is when society, the class which holds social and political control, the capitalist class, places hundreds of proletarians in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and an unnatural death, one that is quite as much a death by violence as that by the sword or bullet, when it deprives thousands of the necessities of life, places them under conditions in which they cannot live, forces them, through the strong arm of the law, to remain in such conditions until that death ensures, which is the inevitable consequence, knows that these thousands of victims must perish, and yet permits these conditions to remain. Its deed is murder just as surely as the deed of the single individual. Disguised, malicious murder, murder against which none can defend himself, which does not seem what it is, because no man sees the murderer, because the death of the victim seems a natural one, since the offense is more one of omission than of commission. But murder, it remains. As one homeless advocate said, there is just a deep, deep sense of loss that these are people like you or I who ended up in a position where they couldn't afford rent, or they couldn't afford their mortgage. Homelessness in Canada is a death sentence, really. The problem is capitalism. Underlying all of this is the lack of affordable housing created by Toronto's overheated real estate market, which has pushed almost 10,000 people onto the streets. This shortage in housing is entirely artificial and created in the interests of profit. 10 years ago, investors were the smallest segment of homebuyers in Ontario. Are you, John? No, there's 9 people, dude. How dare you, sir? The homelessness crisis has, of course, been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, where more workers were pushed into the streets and outbreaks in shelters left people between the rock of infection and the hard place of living outdoors. Tent cities rose up across Toronto in various parks as homeless people came together and shared tents and resources. Last year, these tent cities were crushed by the police at the request of Toronto Mayor John Tory, costing the city $2 million. As we explained at the time, this money could have been spent on public housing rather than brutalizing homeless people and kicking them into the streets. Though encampments don't solve homelessness, shutting them down leaves people isolated and vulnerable, whereas in these encampments, people help keep each other safe in emergencies. However, homelessness isn't just a pandemic problem. The average rent for all property types in the GTA was $2,482 in July 2022 and $2,409 in January 2020, just before the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the housing crisis, but the crisis was already there. Going into the pandemic, over half of Canadians were living paycheck to paycheck. Precarious housing and homelessness are all intrinsic to the capitalist system, which turns every last human necessity into a source of profits for the capitalists and landlords. Today, with interest rates continuing to rise and the mortgage crisis looming, no worker is safe from homelessness. The issue will just get worse in the winter months. While parasitic landlords eat up the workers' paychecks, investors further buy up housing stock and drive up prices, and inflation puts even more pressure on the pocketbooks of the working class. The capitalist system can only provide a good life to a minority in society. the capitalists, and only to the detriment of the rest of us. Only a socialist system would be able to seize investment properties and house the working class and youth, while also taking the profits of the capitalists and investing them in high-quality, affordable housing, training, and putting the unemployed population to work, in reorganizing society, and put the economy into the hands of the working class, to run democratically for the good of the majority, not the enrichment of the society. What's happening in the chat? Andre goes 4, then 3, 2, 1, kaboom, lift off. You guys are fucking hilarious. You guys are fucking hilarious. I'm seeing a call for David Lynch. A call for David Lynch. Let's do it. I'm in with a 7. Thinking of you, Mocked, wherever you are.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go for today's
number. It's October 25, 2022. 10 balls.
So I got 9 people in the chat.
Each ball has a number.
I should see another.
Numbers 1 through 10.
You can't also do a 10.
Swirl the numbers.
Here we go. You guys are just... John, you picked all... all right,
Pick a number.
Doesn't even fucking matter. Doesn't even fucking matter. Do what you want.
Today's number is 8.
We all missed anyway. Like, who gives a fuck? Too bad, Cotton. Yeah, we're all just fucking around. Oh, this is a really interesting article that came out of the Washington Post. The title's all jacked up, but it's Universal Basic Income has been tested repeatedly. It works. Will America ever embrace it? The Washington Post, of course, owned by Jeff Bezos. So this is an interesting article to see get pushed through the Washington Post. In January 2019, Zona Everett was sitting in an airport when her phone rang. On the other end of the line, a voice informed her that she had been randomly chosen to receive $500 a month as part of something called the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration. When Everett had first heard about SEED a few weeks earlier, she'd wondered if it might be a scam, as things that sound too good to be true often are. Her pastor assured her it was real, that 125 residents of poor neighborhoods in Stockton, California, would receive money as part of a groundbreaking experiment. I mean, like, how fucking pathetic are we? That literally just giving people money is now considered a groundbreaking experiment. Like, that's how fucking deluded and just into this fucking idea that, like, yeah, if you give people money, then giving people money won't improve their lives. Like, literally, Jesus Christ himself says, give money to the poor. And we're all just like, does giving money to the poor work? When she got the call, Everett thought she was receiving a one-time payment, which was thrilling enough. Then the woman on the phone told her she'd receive $500 every month for a year and a half with no strings attached. She nearly collapsed from joy right there in the airport. Suddenly, Everett, who in 2018 had lost her job as a Department of Defense logistics specialist, had subsequently tried to make ends meet by driving for DoorDash, then had taken out significant unsubsidized loans to attend college online in a bid to improve her employment prospects, saw a path back to stability. She would be able to cover her car payments and the rent, to keep her phone on without giving up her monthly tithe to her church. For Mayor Michael Tubbs, that was exactly the point. Since childhood, Tubbs had watched his mom and his friends struggle with everyday expenses while receiving only minimal help from the government in Stockton, one of the poorest cities in the country, which sits in California's Central Valley. He theorized that a relatively small guaranteed income, just $6,000 a year per recipient, enough to cover the occasional emergency expense or supplement a minimum wage salary, would single-handedly eliminate the insecurity that governed the lives of many poor Stockton residents. And so, with funds and guidance from the nonprofit Economic Security Project, he created a pilot program, one of the first of its kind in the country. His goal was as simple as it was ambitious: to run a demonstration project so successful that national politicians would have no choice but to consider adopting guaranteed income as a national policy. Sitting in a Stockton Starbucks nearly 3 years later, a soft-spoken Everett remembered nearly every detail of that fateful phone call from Seed. Swaddled in a white puffer coat on an unseasonably cold day, her hair in a low bun, she looked younger than her 51 years as she cradled a caramel frappuccino and choked up as she described the immediate impact the payments had on her life. She quit driving for DoorDash, which gave her the time to find a job as a factory worker at a Tesla plant in Fremont, 60 miles from Stockton. She was able to escape a dysfunctional marriage and move into her own home. For me, it was a stepping stone. It got me to where I was okay by myself, she says. It was right on time. Everything in me was just like, oh, thank you so much, Lord. The SEED program was scheduled to end in the summer of 2020, but its founders secured additional donations to fund an extra 6 months to get people through the worst days of the pandemic. That was another lifesaver for Everett, who was diagnosed with a severe case of COVID-19 and struggled with lingering symptoms, leaving her unable to work for most of the year. Fortunately, the $500 a month from Seed plus disability payments proved to be enough to pay her bills. If you just learned about guaranteed income in the past few years, chances it was from the presidential campaign of Andrew Yang, who got a lot of attention for his proposal that the government offer $1,000 monthly payments to all Americans. But versions of this concept had been circulating for decades among academics and progressive activists, and as the country shut down in the early days of the pandemic, the conditions appeared ripe to try something new, something radical. Pilot programs launched in Los Angeles, in New Orleans, in Denver, but also in historically less progressive cities like Birmingham, Alabama, Columbia, and Gainesville. In March 2020, even a vast majority of congressional Republicans backed a $2 trillion stimulus bill that included unconditional cash payments for tens of millions of Americans. Since then, the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income Coalition, which grew out of SEED, has swelled to more than 90 members and 36 programs. A $15 million donation from Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey helped fund many of the pilots. Now, though, as the country emerges from the pandemic, the guaranteed income movement sits at a crossroads. The pilot programs have created scores of stories like Everett's about how a small amount of money led to a massive change in a recipient's life, and a growing body of research based on the experiments shows that a basic income works. It pulls people out of poverty, improves health outcomes, and makes it easier for people to find jobs and take care of their children. If empirical evidence ruled the world, guaranteed income would be available to every poor person in America, and many of those people would no longer be poor. But empirical evidence does not rule the world, and it is far from clear that there is a political path forward for guaranteed income on a large scale. The city-level experiments cannot last forever. Stockton's lapsed in early 2021, a few months after Tubbs lost his re-election bid to a Republican successor, who showed no interest in trying to keep SEED going. On Capitol Hill, too, political momentum for handing out cash has waned. At the end of 2021, an extension of the expanded child tax credit, which was seen by many advocates as a key stepping stone to a guaranteed income, was blocked by a Democrat representing the state with the 6th highest poverty rate in the country. Early in the pandemic, some of the guaranteed income movement had begun to whisper about accelerating the timeline for taking their efforts nationwide. America's most progressive social policies have always grown out of economic crises, so maybe COVID would bring about a guaranteed income policy in the next few years. But the failure of the expanded federal child tax credit diminished some of that optimism. Many of those same advocates are now looking toward the long game. You have to be willing to fight for something to the end, said Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott, who recently launched a guaranteed income experiment. Even if it doesn't happen, even if you only push it a few feet further, even if it means that you die doing it. Without a radical solution, like, say, giving people money with no strings attached, America will continue to be home to one of the worst rates of income inequality of any rich nation in the world. And from city to city, there's massive energy and momentum to keep expanding this experiment. But true believers also harbor a sense of anxiety about what the future holds. "I'm worried," said Sean Klein, an associate director of Stanford University's Basic Income Lab, "that these guaranteed income demonstrations are going to sunset, and then it's just going to go quiet. For as long as America has had a poverty problem, which is to say, for its entire history, a small group of dreamers has proposed guaranteed income as a solution. The idea dates to the year the country was founded. Thomas Paine proposed a type of basic income in his 1776 pamphlet, Common Sense. In the mid-20th century, it gained traction among Black American thinkers. In 1966, the Black Panthers' 10-point program demanded employment or a guaranteed income for everyone. A year later, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his last book, "Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?" that government aid programs all have a common failing. They are indirect. Each seeks to solve poverty by first solving something else. I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly, by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. The first official proposal for a federal basic income program, though, came not from a paragon of progressivism, but from Richard Nixon. In 1969, Nixon introduced the Family Assistance Plan, which would have provided additional cash to poor families through a negative income tax, cutting checks to the poorest Americans instead of them paying the government, of $1,600, about $13,000 today for a family of 4. The proposal was motivated by Nixon's desire to replace the welfare system, which was unpopular with white blue-collar voters, but it never made it out of the Senate Finance Committee. Many skeptical politicians and voters feared that giving people cash would allow them to quit their jobs, stop looking for work, more or less. Around the same time, a series of negative income tax experiments benefiting about 7,500 people in 6 states appeared to confirm those concerns. In Seattle and Denver, where the 2 largest programs took place, married men worked an average of 7% fewer hours after 3 years of the program, while married and single women worked 17% fewer hours. And while researchers didn't look at any other measures of stability, whether participants were more likely to seek medical care, for example, or whether their children missed fewer days of school, they did observe a modest increase in the divorce rate. Those 2 factors were enough to destroy widespread interest in guaranteed income experiments for several decades. Over time, however, interpretations of the 1970s experiment have morphed. Participants don't seem to have dropped out of the labor force entirely, suggesting that the money may have given them the luxury of waiting a little longer for the right job to come around, instead of rushing to the first available option. And working less sometimes means getting more education, which is almost always a net positive for the economy. An uptick in divorce can be a good thing too. Studies show that financial insecurity is a major contributor to keeping women in failing relationships, as in Everett's case. In retrospect, the legacy of the first significant, guaranteed income pilots was a whole lot of complicated questions and limited information with which to answer them. Meanwhile, the concept of conditional cash transfer programs, in other words, paying poor people for desirable behavior, was gaining steam in middle-income countries like Mexico and Brazil. In 2007, New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg launched a program called Opportunity NYC, which rewarded parents for tasks like taking their children to the doctor and completing job training courses. The experiment had a moderate positive effect on families' overall finances, but did not boost academic performance among elementary schoolers or increased families' likelihood to seek preventative medical care, researchers found. Bloomberg did not extend the program when it expired in 2010. Among many poverty scholars and activists, conditional cash transfers are seen as a step in the right direction, but only a small one. To maximize the impact on poor people's lives, they say money must be a right, not a reward, because that's the only way to empower people to make their own choices. There are positive outcomes from conditional cash. There are positive outcomes from unconditional cash, Klein says. But I think for me, making it conditional misses a really fundamental value around trust, dignity, agency, and freedom. The word dignity comes up a lot among guaranteed income advocates. Research shows that the vast majority of people don't waste cash on vices like drugs and alcohol, but rather use even small amounts to improve their life circumstances dramatically. In a 2019 working paper, Nobel Prize-winning development economist Abhijit Banerjee and two co-authors concluded that the distribution of unconditional cash in low-income countries had positive effects on income, assets, savings, borrowing, total expenditure, food expenditure, dietary diversity, school attendance, test scores, cognitive development, use of health facilities, labor force participation, child labor mitigation, domestic violence, women's empowerment, marriage, fertility, and use of contraception, among others. Banerjee is part of the research team studying the world's largest basic income program, which is midway through a 12-year run across 300 rural villages in Kenya. For about 5,000 people, that means an extra $22 a month for more than a decade. Thus far, the researchers have found participants have been less likely to get sick or go hungry, and more likely to start a business. In the United States, which has the world's largest gross domestic product, the basic income calculus is different than in places like Kenya, where a significant minority of people live on less than $1 a day. But America has its own unique factors, like that inequality rate and a history of racist policies that have left a disproportionate number of people of color at the bottom of the income scale. Indeed, Tubbs and his counterparts frame basic income as something akin to reparations, a way to alleviate harm done to marginalized people by decades of biased and ineffective policy. The seed recipients were struggling to survive because society had let them down, Tubbs argues, and the conventional methods of helping them were paternalistic and inadequate. In Baltimore, where more than 1 in 5 residents live below the federal poverty line, a new guaranteed income pilot gives $1,000 a month to 200 recipients, all of them parents in high-crime neighborhoods. We're like the birthplace of radical redlining, right? Scott says. You're not going to erase inequality that was caused by policy, without creating policy to do the opposite. The notion of guaranteed income as a government-backed corrective for decades of racist policies has spread to dozens of cities, many led by young black mayors. Scott, 38, consults regularly with St. Louis Mayor Tishari Jones, 50, whose city launched a guaranteed income pilot in December 2021. St. Paul, Minnesota Mayor Melvin Carter, 43, serves as co-chair of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and is mentor to Tubbs, 32. According to Tubbs, guaranteed income programs in Columbia, Shreveport, and Atlanta were the result of a black mayor's group text shortly after George Floyd's murder, in which he evangelized for King's approach to solving urban poverty, before sending everyone a copy of Where Do We Go From Here? It's no coincidence that these are the people plotting the future of guaranteed income in America, Scott argues. Many of them grew up in families that would have benefited from guaranteed income programs. We're the first group of elected folks who actually lived through all the shit, he said, looking up from his phone for a rare moment during a 30-minute interview at Baltimore City Hall and drawing out the vowel sound in lived. We lived through crack and heroin. We lived through zero tolerance. So all the stuff that folks are talking about now, we understand it in a way that no one else will. The most basic objection to guaranteed income programs is about cost. Providing $1,000 a month to every American regardless of income, which some scholars argue would make the policy more palatable than one targeted to people in poverty, would cost $3.1 trillion a year, nearly half the federal government's entire budget in 2021. And yet, the adage that it is expensive to be poor applies not just to individuals, but to their governments. A mountain of evidence shows how tightly income inequality correlates with crime rates, education levels, drug abuse, incarceration, intimate partner violence, and physical and mental health, which together cost billions upon billions of tax dollars. Numerous studies, for example, have found it would be cheaper to give homes to unhoused people than it is to cover all the costs associated with allowing them to stay on the streets. But progressives have faced an uphill climb to convince policymakers and voters that providing free housing is a worthwhile strategy. While there isn't yet research on the potential economic benefits of a guaranteed income specifically, studies of similar initiatives have shown that pulling people out of poverty generates a huge increase in tax revenue as well as savings on public assistance programs. First, though, the guaranteed income movement had to show its idea worked at all. When the current wave of experiments kicked off, the goal was to drown opponents in data demonstrating that the simplest idea for alleviating poverty was, in fact, the silver bullet it appeared to be. Of course, whether something works depends on the definition. Obviously, giving people more money makes them less poor, but the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration Team set out to show that as little as $500 a month, not nearly enough to replace actual income, would have a multiplier effect, allowing recipients to improve their employment prospects, their physical health, their mental well-being, their children's education, and their overall stability. A research team from the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Guaranteed Income Research laid out 3 overarching questions. How does guaranteed income affect volatility? To what degree do changes in income volatility alter financial well-being, psychological distress, and physical functioning? How does guaranteed income generate agency over one's future? To conduct their randomized controlled trial, the Penn researchers tracked purchases on the debit cards provided to the 125 recipients, asked recipients and control group members to input monthly income data, and conducted biannual surveys to learn how people's lives were going. The questions focused on recipients' well-being, but also on some of the most important common objections to guaranteed income. Did they quit their jobs, content to live on free money? Did they blow all their funds on cigarettes and liquor? I never came in asking for permission, Tubbs said on a sweltering November day in Los Angeles, where he moved after losing his re-election bid in Stockton. I was not ready for a vote. I was going to do this. But I did go in wanting to make sure I understood sort of where the sentiment was, where the opposition was. I said, well, look, we'll evaluate this and see where the money is spent, and we'll see who's right. In March 2021, the researchers released preliminary data from the first year of the pilot. While their first peer-reviewed paper is still in the works, their self-reported results show an unqualified success. More than 50% of the recipients said they could pay for a $400 emergency expense in cash, compared with 25% before the program began and 28% of the control group. Recipients experienced statistically significant improvements in the mental health as determined by a common test of psychological well-being. Importantly for Tubbs and other politicians, to sell conservatives on guaranteed income, the study found that seed participants were more likely to find full-time employment than members of the control group. Recipients spent the biggest share of their cash on food, followed by other merchandise, utility bills, and gas and car maintenance. Less than 1% of the total allotted funds were used to buy tobacco or alcohol. Honestly, I don't think seed could have gone any better, Klein says. I'm astounded at what a little, small demonstration can do. A year later, data from a DC-based guaranteed income experiment showed similarly promising results. Thrive east of the river provided 5,500 to 600 families in Ward 8 during the pandemic, either as a lump sum or as 5 monthly payments. Although the program was too short-term to measure effects on employment, Urban Institute researchers found significant positive effects on recipients' mental health, food security, and ability to meet their children's needs. Thrive wasn't part of the mayor's consortium launching guaranteed income pilots, but policymakers embraced the Urban Institute data as an important part of their overall work. Even my staff cautioned me about being so optimistic and confident, but I was going to bet on people, Tubbs said, tilting back in his chair in the messy shed-turned office that sits behind his home in a historically black neighborhood of LA. The seed results were particularly vindicating, because everyone was like, we need cash, but there were all these racist tropes, and the opposite of all the tropes is what the data showed was true. The question Tubbs and his allies did not originally confront, however, is what would happen if they showed that guaranteed income works, but still didn't convince enough lawmakers to support it. Toward the end of 2021, guaranteed income advocates got a harsh lesson on the limitation of data when it comes to winning the hearts and minds of policymakers and voters. Earlier that year, in response to the pandemic, President Biden had signed a dramatically expanded version of the child tax credit. Suddenly, parents would be paid as much as $3,600 per child per year, up from $2,000. But there was a bigger change, too. The money became fully refundable, meaning parents would receive the funds even if their total tax liability was lower than the credit itself. Historically, the poorest one-third of parents didn't benefit from the CTC because they pay the least in taxes. Now, they would receive an extra several $1,000s a year, delivered monthly, essentially a small, guaranteed income. Scholars called it one of the most important moves to fight poverty since the creation of Social Security. As soon as parents began receiving the extra CTC funds, several groups of researchers began studying the results. We were hopeful that people would be able to see the immediate benefits, the poverty reduction that was happening, but also the impacts for families in terms of reducing stress and the ability to afford the basics, said Chris Weimer, who co-led one such team at Columbia University's Center on Poverty and Social Policy. With that proof of effectiveness in hand, Weimer hoped Congress would feel compelled to make the policy permanent. In December 2021, Weimer and his colleagues released a report on the first 6 months of the expanded CTC. Each month, they found, the policy single-handedly kept as many as 3.8 million children out of poverty, reducing the child poverty rate by nearly 30%. The largest percentage of money was spent on food, followed by essential bills, clothing, rent or mortgage payments, school expenses, and paying down debt. The number of families who didn't have enough to eat in a given week dropped by 24%. Parents were no more likely to stop working because of the extra funds. A separate Columbia study found that a permanent expansion would have generated 10 times as much revenue as it cost, but ultimately, none of that mattered. The Build Back Better bill, which included a 1-year extension of the CTC expansion, narrowly passed the U.S. House in November 2021. But all 50 Senate Republicans opposed it. When Biden's negotiations with Senator Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat from West Virginia, broke down just before the holiday break, Biden stopped publicly advocating for the new version of the CTC. After the expanded CTC ran out, Weimer and other scholars found that the child poverty rates increased immediately, spiking 41% in the first month. About 1 in 7 American children lives below the poverty line, which, at just $27,750 for a family of 4, dramatically underestimates the number who are simply too poor to eat well, or who have consistent electricity access, or to afford registration fees for school sports. The child tax credit saga forced many in the guaranteed income movement to give up the hope that a federal policy was imminent. Advocates talk openly about the lessons they learned, including that statistics are not sufficient and that upfront costs feel more tangible than long-term fiscal benefits. A partial solution to both problems, they believe, is encouraging recipients to tell their own stories rather than being rendered anonymous on a list of statistics. Nearly every guaranteed income pilot program selects a small subset of recipients. Zona Everett was one, to speak publicly about their experience, providing them professional media training. The chosen storytellers are taught to focus on specific details. What emergency expense were they able to cover with their guaranteed income? What smaller threat, whether a restaurant meal or a night away from home, did they splurge on? How could they tell their children were feeling more stable? And several pop up regularly in national media outlets. We have a goal of changing or challenging narratives around people, said Juliana Bidadenur, a philosophy professor at Stanford and director of the university's Basic Income Lab. That's a long, slow work. The current initiatives are like adding a few individual stones to the base of a cathedral so grand it might not be completed for decades. It's always about more than just actual policy. It's about how we view each other, and when we think of each other as deserving of support, and when we don't, and what stands in the way. And if we understand that, and we make progress on that, we make progress on many other things. Despite the setbacks at the federal level, philanthropic interest in guaranteed income continues to increase, and the body of research on local programs continues to grow. No two experiments work exactly the same way. Some are only for people making under a certain income, others are limited to certain neighborhoods or for single parents, making each city feel like its own laboratory. Still, as in any movement, especially one where the greatest energy is at the local level, there are disagreements, some over substance and others over who gets the most attention. Unanswered questions range from the fundamental, should guaranteed income be provided to everyone, or more narrowly targeted to lift people out of poverty, to the ultra-specific, should money be provided on prepaid debit cards or via online transfers? And there is plenty of jockeying among movement leaders over who knows best. 350 miles down Interstate 5 from Stockton, the Compton Pledge has replaced SEED as the nation's busiest guaranteed income experiment. The key difference, while most pilots are designed to investigate whether basic income works, the team in Compton sees that question as too obvious to merit discussion. Instead, they are studying the factors that make it work best. Now we know that we should do this policy, says Nika Soon Xiong, the Compton Pledge's co-director. The question is really how. And unless we get more future-oriented, thinking about how and asking questions to inform the answer, we're going to fail. Soon Xiong, 29, stands out among movement leaders. Its most visible proponents are black. She is the daughter of ethnically Chinese, natively South African parents. She didn't grow up in Compton, and she began studying basic income as a PhD student at Oxford University. And whereas many guaranteed income advocates talk in detail about how a policy would have helped her own families, her father is billionaire bioscientist Patrick Soon-Shiong, who owns the Los Angeles Times and a share of the Lakers. She also voices a more radical case for guaranteed income, laced with language about prison abolition, defunding the police, and reparations. Soon-Shiong is uncommonly focused on the nitty-gritty of guaranteed income programs. The 800 Compton Pledge recipients are split into several groups. Some receive money bi-weekly, others monthly, quarterly, or in one lump sum, and amounts range from $3,600 to $7,200 a year, based on family size, allowing researchers to draw conclusions about what schedule works best for recipients and how much is necessary to make a substantive difference. Participants can choose from 4 ways to receive their funds: direct deposit, Venmo, PayPal, and debit card, and can track their payments, find resources, and ask questions on an online platform orders of magnitude more attractive and intuitive than any government website in the history of the internet. While a raft of third-party companies have begun competing for contracts to operate basic income pilot programs and payment systems, Compton's homemade system is significantly cheaper, meaning the more money for actual people in need. While Soon Shiong and Tubbs have a good relationship, she is sensitive to the common narrative that he is the leader of the guaranteed income movement. You talk to Michael Tubbs and then you maybe put Nika at the very end, was how she summed up most reporting on the topic. Their relationship goes back to Stanford, where she was a few years behind him. Seed Executive Director Siki Samara was 2 years behind Shu Xiong. Tubbs' connection to Jack Dorsey, which led to Dorsey's $15 million donation to Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, also came through Stanford. And while Tubbs did play a role in the Compton Pledge, introducing Soon Shiong to then Mayor Aja Brown, she is quick to make clear that she asked for the connection, then presented Brown a 14-page, intricately detailed proposal, because she was independently committed to creating a guaranteed income pilot. Last year, Soon Shiong submitted a proposal for the Compton's Pledge parent organization, Fund for Guaranteed Income, to oversee a pilot program in neighboring Los Angeles, her hometown. Instead, LA chose to work with Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, using a third-party payment platform instead of one FGI created. She is occasionally exasperated that having what she sees as unequivocally the best product hasn't made her team the recognized leader in the field, describing the Compton Pledge as the black sheep of the movement. She's also concerned that an endless string of pilots showing the same results isn't an effective way of building on the momentum created earlier in the pandemic. We know that we are the best at what we do, and it is disheartening and frustrating when the nonprofit world is centered around who's focusing the most on communications, who's focusing the most on funder outreach, she said, sitting at the dining room table in her bright white West Hollywood apartment. We are focusing the most on how to build something that works, and that's not really rewarded. I still think we're right. I still think we're doing it the right way, and it just looks different from what others are doing. Ask Soon Shiong what other pilot programs are doing it the right way, and she won't name the big ones, launched by city governments this spring and summer in places like Baltimore, New Orleans, and Chicago. Instead, she brings up some of the tiniest programs in the country, ones less focused on the academic question than simply putting money in people's hands. One of the pilots Soon Shiong likes to promote, the Boston-based Community Love Fund, started by funding 5 formerly incarcerated women in the Roxbury neighborhood, with a budget of $30,000 a year. After FGI came in as partner in late 2021, the program expanded to 25 currently and formerly incarcerated women. A similar program, the Chicago Future Fund, is using FGI support to provide $500 a month to 30 formerly incarcerated residents in the West Garfield Park neighborhood, entirely independently from the $31 million pilot the city launched this past summer. In the earliest days of the Community Love Fund program, founder Andrea James says she asked the mayor of Boston for a small grant to support the group's work, but was turned down, which she now considers a gift. Running the program through her nonprofit, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, makes the program feel like mutual aid, not a tool of the establishment. We're building alternate systems from within communities, because even when we can get a city or state entity to work with us on things, they mostly commandeer our language and then replicate something that is still attached to law enforcement, attached to government bureaucracy, attached to things that aren't community-led, James said. Ultimately, though, getting more money to more people requires the type of massive funding that only governments can provide. FGI recently announced partnerships with 2 government-run programs in California, one in Sonoma County and one in Long Beach. Tubbs, meanwhile, is now working as an advisor to California Governor Gavin Newsom, who last year approved a $35 million fund to create additional guaranteed income pilots. I am a hyper-pragmatist, Tubbs says. Community Love Fund is great for the 5 women in Roxbury. It's going to change their lives. But there's thousands who need it. And governments scale, right? Many of the newest pilots are doing their best to have it both ways. Running the program through the city government, which allows them to combine philanthropic dollars with pandemic relief funds, but planning the details with an unusual level of input from ordinary residents. In Baltimore, 3 representatives from neighborhood groups sat on the pilot steering committee alongside scholars, lawyers, and nonprofit executives. In July 2021, the group proposed 3 potential target populations for the pilot, asking Mayor Scott to choose among young parents, residents of neighborhoods with the highest crime rates, or formerly incarcerated residents. Instead, he asked for a hybrid approach, 18 to 24-year-old parents in high-crime neighborhoods, all of them making under the city's median income. In August, 200 young parents in Baltimore received their first $1,000 payments of the 2-year pilot. By the time they get their last in summer 2024, the guaranteed income movement will be in a very different place. Where that will be, no one is entirely sure. Perhaps the wave of evidence-based support for anti-poverty initiatives will have grown to an unstoppable groundswell, forcing conservatives and moderates to get on board. But it's disconcertingly easy to imagine the opposite, that poverty rates continue to rise unchecked after a precipitous drop during the pandemic, and most of us silently agree to look the other way. Back in Stockton, Zona Everett still hadn't been able to return to work as of September because of chronic illness, and since her $500 a month ran out in early 2021, she has struggled to make ends meet. She's on a variety of state benefit programs, picks up a little extra money doing nails for friends and neighbors, and occasionally swallows her pride enough to accept handouts from a church. But it's never quite enough. A few months after Seed ended, her car was repossessed. If the current pilots end without a clear path toward a larger policy, thousands of people will be left in Everett's shoes. She remains thankful for the $12,000 she received over the 2 years of Seed, but these days, an early poster child of guaranteed income's possibilities has yet again been left to fend for herself. Megan Greenwald is a journalist in New York. She is writing a book about private equity and how it affects workers. What I think is most interesting about this article is that it's in the Washington Post. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. I'm also glad that I read that whole thing. I've been really sick over this month. Haven't been able to read. Haven't been able to read. Oh, man. I'm really glad that I read that article, you know? I'm really glad that I read that article. I think it's easy for me to get stuck in my own bubble and to get stuck in my own perspective of things. And I'm really glad that I just went through that, because it really reminds me that though things appear grim, there are people out in the world who are trying desperately to make it better. That are trying desperately to make it better, and who are pushing on this issue. And we can critique the concept of a basic income. It should be critiqued from the communist perspective, right? It's a capitalist reform, but I still think it has validity, and I still think that it has worth and value. It's certainly the only good idea I've heard about what we can do within the structure of capital. And given that my solution is revolution, if people want to put this forward as an alternative, I think that we should let them. Oddity, it's crazy that people don't seem to be interested in the bare minimum to prevent capitalism from self-destruction. But then look at how docile the populace is, and it doesn't seem to matter. Good article. Shame our useless government aren't interested in basic income. I'll do that tomorrow, Eric. I'll do that tomorrow, bud. Good to see you. What were you guys talking about during this whole time? That was a big, long article, dude. That was a big, long article. It was longer than I anticipated, honestly. So, sorry about those, but I am super glad that I went through it. Seeds, aren't they mercenaries? I don't think so, dude. I call BS. If you work in the D&D, one resume update on LinkedIn, and you'll have defense contractors fighting to get you with a security clearance like that. Huh? Above my pay grade. They were paying a PMC out of UK $6,000 a month to go and fight in Ukraine. Yeah, I'd take that money. Yeah, some of them died there. They don't get to see that money, yeah? If you have the combat expertise and speak out, understand some Russian. I play Call of Duty Black Ops on difficult and know every insult on Russian thanks to multiplayer. Where do I sign? Yeah, you're hired. Perfect. Unfortunately, I can't say gamer words in here. That's hilarious. That's hilarious, dude. Is John admitting that he is he's in cybersecurity? Are you the psyop, John? You're the psyop, aren't you, bud? I knew it. It's you. It's you. Yeah, shame our useless governments aren't interested in basic income. I see it spark up every so often. There are MPs not only in the Liberal government but in the NDP government, in the NDP opposition, or whatever you want to call it. It does continuously spark up. It just seems like they're just not desperate enough. I think that's really what it comes down to. They're just not desperate enough. That from the political perspective, for politicians, that they don't want to just give this shit away. Right? They don't want to just do this stuff. Right? To them it is all about like leveraging and moving and what can we gain for ourselves. Right? Because it's all vanity projects for these guys. Right? They're not doing anything out of the goodness of their heart. Right? They're doing things so that they can secure power for themselves, and they don't feel afraid. They don't feel desperate, right? They're in the position they want to be in, and maybe if they actually do feel afraid and they actually do feel desperate, they'll actually do something, but they're not there yet. Did you see the video I posted on Discord where the president of Ukraine before Zelensky admitted that the Minsk agreement was meant to delay the Russians so Ukraine developed its military? I mean, that's what it became anyway. Like, that's what it, yeah. NATO can train Ukrainian military. Yeah, buy time. Buy time. Get the near as I can tell, the Russians the entire time were really, really hoping that there could be a diplomatic solution. And throughout Russian history, there seems to be this constant refrain or an echoing that the Russians seem to underestimate the psychopathic nature of capitalists. It seems to happen basically every time. Like, Stalin underestimates how psychotic the kulaks actually are. Right? That he doesn't anticipate that they'll burn down their own crops and slaughter their own cattle. Right? He underestimates how psychotic the Nazis would be. He underestimates how vicious and cruel that these people would actually be. And I think now with Putin, you're also seeing kind of an echoing of this, where he sort of hopes that these capitalists and the Nazis in Ukraine will be reasonable and will see, like, we don't need to go to war here. Like, there's no reason to move forward in this way. And he sees and most of the Russians see the Minsk agreement as a way to attempt to find a diplomatic solution. But we see now that it's completely done in bad faith. It's done in bad faith in order to just buy time, so that the Ukrainian military can gain more force, which shows you exactly what I've been saying this entire time, and what I've come to say about you just can't negotiate with Nazis. There's just no negotiating with them. You can't work with them. You can't use them. You can't do any of that. Nazis are their own entity and their own thing. They don't, if they're talking to you, it is only to use you so that they can betray you later. There is no such thing as a diplomatic solution with Nazis. There's no such thing as talking them out of it. That it doesn't exist. That and this situation with the Minsk, this admission with the Minsk Accord shows that that's exactly the truth. The only reason they were talking to the Russians was to delay and buy time so that they could be better equipped for the fight. Like I worry that we're never going to learn our lesson with this. Like, you take a look at what's going throughout America, and there is this sort of belief. Like, listen to what Joe Rogan has to say about it, right? Joe Rogan's position is that it's completely fine to platform Nazis. It's completely fine to let them openly spread their bile and their filth around, because good speech beats bad speech. That's how he thinks about it. He thinks that, oh, what we'll do is we'll platform a Nazi, let the Nazi say whatever he wants to say, and then we'll also platform someone who isn't a Nazi, and maybe somebody who's against a Nazi, and then he'll say, and then good speech beats bad speech. It's naive. It's naive. On the face of it, it's naive. The reason Nazis are speaking to you is to gain something for the inevitable conflict that they are preparing for. That's how they view the world. That's how they talk about the world. That's what they expect to do. And the only reason they're even willing to discuss things with you is from preparation. That's it. Like, Matt Walsh isn't going around talking about what is a woman and trans people or any of that kind of stuff because he's genuinely interested in the subject. He's doing it so that he can gather force with his Nazi friends and highlight who their enemies are. Like, in that movie that he made, What is a Woman, the only reason he made that woman was to highlight who should be targeted by his Nazi buddies. That's the reason he made that film. He didn't make that film to be like, well, what is a woman, and what are the, let's talk about these trans issues. I'm confused by all of this. Let's go talk to these experts. Can you tell me more about trans rights and all that? That's not what he was doing. He was pointing at people and saying, look, fellow Nazis, because he is a Nazi. Like, he calls himself a theocratic fascist, right? He was pointing at people and being like, look, fellow Nazis, here is a person who I think that we should kill. Kill this person. That's what he's doing. That's all he's doing. So he's just painting targets. And the only other thing that Nazis do is recruit. So, like, when the creator of the Proud Boys, I forget what his name is offhand, like, the reason he goes on Joe Rogan is to recruit, right? He's not going on Joe Rogan to find, like, a middle ground. He's not trying to win in the battlefield of ideas, right? Like, the Nazis don't care about that. Like, they don't care about the battlefield of ideas. They care about violence. That's what they care about. They care about putting bullets in people's backs. And I mean backs. Like, they're not interested in a fair fight. They're not interested in winning on equal ground or honor or dignity or any of that kind of shit. They're interested in shooting people in the back of the head when they don't see it coming. And the reason why Nazis go on Joe Rogan's podcast is not to like find the middle ground and debate interesting issues and win in the battlefield of sedition. It's to recruit. It's to recruit. That's it. That's all it's for. It's just to recruit. Horath is now the mayor of Hamilton. Yes, indeed. I think that's a good position for her. I think that's the position she should have been in from the very beginning. If anyone's interested, there's a podcast called The Empire Never Ended that goes deep into fascist quote-unquote theory. Thanks, Gino. Appreciate that. Don't know if I've seen you around in a while, Gino. Good to see you, bud. I heard Andrew Tate may convert to Islam in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Not sure if it's true. Who gives a fuck? I honestly do not care. I couldn't care less about Andrew Tate. The fact that he's persisting, I find to be creepy and weird. I find that to be as creepy and weird as people's fascination with serial killers. Like he's a very creepy, strange man who we are empowering and allowing to persist in the social consciousness because I think that we're fascinated with how grotesque he is. Like I think we're as he has the same kind of appeal to us as Jeffrey Dahmer. That we're watching him and the people who are drawn to him with the same kind of like infatuation as like, why are there serial killers? Who are these people who are interested in murdering people, right? And Andrew Tate's not much different. Like he articulates his cruelty and maliciousness through women versus men, right? By creating like a man's issue. But at the end of the day, what he's trying to do is exploit women. That's his entire position. His entire position is, how do you get women to be your slaves? That's what he wants. That's what he's fighting for. That's what he does. Like, I find it weird that he's still around. I find it very weird. Thanks, man. I'm a day sleeper, to be honest. Oh yeah, I lived that life for a little while. Tell that to the mega communism, dude. What an obvious psyop that is. It's become really obvious to me that that's a complete psyop. That the CIA has obviously seen the upswell of communist support and the upswell of leftist and anti-capitalism in the society, and is now attempting to do that thing that they always do, co-opt it, right? They're just attempting to co-opt it and use it for themselves, like they did with environmentalist movements, right? That environmentalism became the culture, and so they just put it on a package and sold it to you. Did they actually change anything? No, right? But they sold it to you, and so they convinced you, yeah, what we're doing here is environmentalism, right? They'll do the same thing with communism if they can, right? Yeah, sure, get in the mine. It's communism. Absolutely. Like, they'll reinstate slavery and call it communism if you believe it. And that's what it is. And the people who are peddling this mega communist stuff at this stage in the game, I consider them just CIA assets. Like, it seems really obvious now that that's the grift. I've seen enough information and I've seen enough stuff to be like, oh yeah, like that's pretty clearly what they're doing. They're trying to co-opt any kind of communist rhetoric or communist idea and package it culturally, while materially it's capitalism. That's what they're doing. And so if they can have the working class be like, wow, it's so great living under communism and working away for communism while it's literally capitalism, they'll do that. And Americans are so stupid and illiterate that that will happen, right? Like you sort of think to yourself, how could that possibly be happening where people believe the inverse to be the truth? Well, you see that all the time. People believe the inverse to be the truth all the time in America, right? It seems to be easy to do. That people will literally say, oh, if we get socialism, then this will happen, and they describe capitalism, right? Like there's a whole like thread and idea on the internet of like socialism is when capitalism, right? That the people who are the most virulently opposed to socialism, when they describe what they're afraid of, are literally describing the system they live in currently, which is the system of capital. And so if that can happen, then of course they'll be able to push the idea and convince, like, 19-year-old people with blue hair and like be like, yeah, you're a trans minority. We're absolutely we're super happy, and you know what? We're all happy to live in this communist world together. Absolutely, yeah. Show up to work on time. Every time I come on YouTube, I'm being bombarded with Crowder ads. Yeah, they're really working hard, right? No, they're really working hard. It's Crowder, Peterson, Shapiro, and Walsh. Those are the four Nazis of the apocalypse right now. Those are the four people who the billionaire class are really funneling a lot of money towards and just shoving in front of us constantly. So that they're incredible, like they're normalizing Nazism is what they're doing. Like that's their role in all of this, is to normalize Nazism and to make sure that Nazism becomes completely acceptable in the public consciousness. Like Peterson's version of Nazism is doing that waffle, taking things that are concrete and factually true, like climate change, and being like, whoa, maybe not, right? So he's a climate change denialist. He adds a kind of academic credibility to his version of Nazism that really suckers in a lot of people. And he has no solutions, though. It's a complete failure. Shapiro brings a lot of credibility because he's Jewish, right? So it's the same kind of thing with the Zelensky thing, where people are like, Ukraine can't be Nazi. They elected a Jew. Shapiro can't support Nazis. He's a Jew. And in a way, I think there's some level of truth. But like Zelensky, I think Shapiro is just a dupe. Like, I don't think he actually understands who follows him and who listens to him. And I don't think he actually, like, the people who follow him and listen to him will turn around and betray him. Like, when the time comes. Like, they like what he says now, and they like that he's organizing a Nazi movement. They like that about him, right? They like his ideas, and they use his ideas, and they use his talking points. But when the purge comes, they know he'll go, right? They know. They know, right? They're not going to fuck around about it. Crowder, I think, is just happy to be in the room, right? I think when you think about like a useful idiot, when you think about like truly a useful idiot, I think that's Crowder. That he's the definition of a guy who says things to get a response, and if the response is sort of this ghastly horror, then he's like, yeah, right? And I think that once the purges actually begin, he will actually be appalled by what he is. Like, Peter, when the purges begin, I think Peterson will sort of fade into an obscureness and attempt to try to justify and rationalize it away, and will descend into madness. I think he ends his life with dementia and madness. Shapiro gets purged, or flees. Crowder, I think, just runs like a madman, because I genuinely don't think he understands what's happening around him. I don't think he's intelligent enough to understand that. And I think he'll see the horror and then recognize what he is when it happens. And Matt Walsh is a true believer. When the purges begin, he'll be the ones pulling the trigger. Like, and these guys are Nazis, and they exist to normalize the conversation and to organize people to create targets like they've done with the trans community. They've created targets now that the trans community is completely targeted by these neo-Nazi groups, and yeah, things are going to go down. Things are going to go down, and at this point, I think it's unavoidable. Like, I think there's too much force that's been organized that if even all these guys started to stand up and be like, we should stop this, this is madness, right? I think it would continue anyway. I think that those guys would just be deposed, and the Nazis that they helped organize and empower will continue on without them. Because, like, they're Nazis, you know? Yeah, whoa, don't lump him into honest folks like serial killers. Good point, John. No, you're right. You're right, dude. Like, you know, serial killers are just following their impulses, you know? They're just following that internal kind of story that says to them, hey, you should just kill people. You know? Good, honest work. And Dexter has taught us that serial killers can sometimes kill bad people, you know? And I guess that's okay, right? Fucking Dexter was a weird fucking show, dude. Like, go watch Dexter again, but don't root for him. Like, really understand what he is, right? And when you watch that show, you're like, this is a weird fucking show. It's fucking creepy. It's creepy that this character is presented to us as sympathetic. It's creepy to us that we're supposed to go along and be, like, rooting for him. It's fucking creepy. Like, what a creepy ass show. Really makes me think, like, I should make some creepy ass media. I should write a book that's creepy as shit. I think people would go for it. I just listen to left-wing stuff, so I don't know why they keep bombarding me with those ads. Because they want to get you, bud. They want to get you. That's why. That's why they're doing it. They're like, you're politically interested. What they want you to do is become a debate bro. That's what they want you to do, right? They want you to go and become a debate bro. There's a reason why I'm not interested in doing debates, like being a debate bro, like Vosh or Destiny, right? Because the debate bro culture helps the Nazis. It helps obfuscate, and it helps create a shield and a smoke cloud defense for Nazis. Because it's not about finding a consensus. It's not about finding a middle ground. It's not about coming to an understanding, right? It's about organizing Nazis. And they want people to come in and talk to them so that they can use them as a sounding board, right, to spread their Nazi ideas into larger and larger audiences. And they're what they want you to do is they want you to be doing this. They want you to go and scroll and, like, press play on YouTube video. And then Steven Crowder shows up and goes, Nazis are fine! And you go, oh, Nazis aren't fine, Steven Crowder! Click on video! Post and comment on video from Steven Crowder to empower his algorithm and continue it forward. You're so stupid, Steven Crowder. I'm gonna fuel your algorithm and spread you even farther. Oh, you're such a fucking idiot. And then they want you to make another video. They want you to make a video and splice it all and be like, Steven Crowder is so stupid. And here, 10 reasons Steven Crowder is such a stupid idiot. And they want you to do that. Because you'll create that video, and then a bunch of other people will see that video and be like, Steven Crowder seems like a real idiot. I'm going to go to his live stream. Like, they want you to engage. And if you engage through hate, that's still engagement. So if you're a left-winger and you go to watch Steven Crowder's stuff, it's a win for them. That's why they're doing it. Yeah, they'll get rid of him when he's not useful anymore. Yeah, they've threatened him before. He knows. Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you think it's just for money, or are they really Nazis? I mean, little column A, little column B. I think for Matt Walsh, he's a Nazi. Like, I don't think it's about money for Matt Walsh. I think that he's just straightforwardly a Nazi. For Steven Crowder, I think it is more about fame. Like, money, sure, but I think it is more about fame. I think that he's just naturally, he wants to be on stage, but he's not a good enough comedian, right? So he has like this whole political YouTube channel aspect that he does instead. And he plays it like fast and loose as if he is a comedian, but he's not a comedian because he's not funny. And so he's found his little niche. And I think that's kind of how he started. And then larger forces got glommed onto him, and I think they saw him for what he could be, which is a useful idiot to spread Nazism. And that's exactly what he does. But I don't think he understands it. Like, I don't actually think he understands it. So I think it's just about the fame for him. I think Shapiro is just all about himself. Honestly. Like, I think he's just like, people are looking at me. Daddy will be so proud. You know? Like, I really do think, like, someone like him just has, like, a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. He's like a prodigy child, right? And so he's like, I'm the smartest guy in the room. Everybody should listen to me. I'm the greatest. Right? He keeps going up in front of people and like, he has entire audiences that he talks to. He's considered a credible thinker for some reason because he talks really fast, even though everything that comes out of his mouth is very, very, very stupid. Like, he's a desperately stupid individual. I think that that's something that people don't really think about Shapiro, but I definitely do. That, like, Shapiro is very, 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 very stupid. Like, very stupid. I bet he tests very well. Like, I bet he when he does testing, he does really well. And sure, he plays the violin, right? Like, he's a prodigy violinist, and he talks real fast. Like, all of that's true. I just don't think he's smart at all. Like, I don't think he can put basic things together in really basic ways. And I think a lot of his extreme stupidity reveals itself from his worship of a text he doesn't read, right? Like, he's functionally illiterate when it comes to his own religious belief. He's wearing this yarmulke, but he doesn't give a fuck about it. Like, he doesn't care about the religion he professes to believe, because if he did, he wouldn't be such a hateful little Nazi, right? If he was actually reading the book that he professes to venerate, like, he would probably not be a little Nazi, right? He'd probably pay attention to the prophets, right? He would probably pay attention to the warnings that, like, Micah and Toba give. Like, he'd probably read the book of Job and actually be like, oh yeah, I see this happening in my world around me. But he doesn't read the book. He doesn't know anything about it. He is illiterate, and he's very stupid. Like, this is a guy who actually said many times, over and over and over again, and still does. He says that, well, climate change won't be an issue because people will just sell their houses. Like, that's a profoundly, profoundly stupid thing to say. Like, maybe if you said it once, right? Well, climate change won't be an issue because when the water rises, people will just sell their houses. Huh? Like, all it takes is, like, one, like, drunken, like, half-aware sloth man being like, sell it to who? Who's gonna buy a flooded-out house? Like, that's all it takes for anybody to realize how stupid that statement is. Right? But he just keeps saying it over and over and over and over again. Like, and so the only reason someone like that would say that and then keep saying it is if they're profoundly idiotic. And I do think that Shapiro is profoundly stupid. He just talks fast. That's all. Like, I almost guarantee that if I took any of the stuff that Shapiro said and I just repeated it slowly in the voice that I have, I think that anybody would suddenly go, holy fuck, that's stupid. This is something that I've noticed in my life, right? People will say things to me that are fucking stupid. And that's normal. Like, I'm not trying to judge people on this level. People say dumb shit all the time. I say dumb shit all the time, right? But instead of saying that's fucking stupid, I'll just repeat it to them, right? So they'll just say the thing they said, and then I'll repeat it back to them, and I can see it. They go, that's stupid. And so they change it so that it means more what they meant and it's less stupid, right? And I think somebody just needs to do this with Shapiro. Just like take some of his speeches, take some of his statements, and just say them. And I really genuinely feel like people's response to it would be like, oh, fuck, yeah, this guy's an idiot. Like a real fucking Luddite. And yet his whole brand, like his whole brand is like facts don't care about your feelings. His whole brand is that he's hyper intelligent and that he's this prodigy, right? So when it turns on him, the way that it turns on him, he's going to be shocked. Like he is. Like he's going to be shocked by it. Because he's not intelligent enough to put it together. I remember seeing like some more news. Like, Cody Shoddy, right? He put together this whole thing about Ben Shapiro. And one of the things that really stuck with me was this moment where somebody's talking to Ben Shapiro and says like, and they're talking about how there's only white people in here. Like why are there only white people in your audience? And Ben Shapiro goes, well, I would love it if there were black people or Hispanic people, or if there was a whole array of people. I would love it if I had more diverse crowds, but it seems like it's only white people who are interested, right? And you could kind of see it on the interviewer's face of like, why do you think that is, Ben? Like, why do you think it's the case that only white people seem to come to listen to your talks? Could it possibly be because you're spreading around a white supremacist ideology and leading people towards Nazism? Could it possibly be that literal neo-Nazis have figured out that you are attracting white supremacists and Nazis and they use your events as a recruitment ground? Could it possibly be the fact that every time Ben Shapiro stands up and talks, there's a whole bunch of white supremacists who funnel people down into towards the Nazi pipeline? Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. But he's too stupid to notice this. All Shapiro cares about, all he cares about, is that I'm up on a podium and people are looking at me. That's it. It doesn't go any further than that. Shapiro and JP had a good old time in Jerusalem on the Mount. Yeah. But Andre, I think I got to be real specific with something here. With Shapiro, I actually don't think it's hucksterism. Right? Like, Peterson, I think, is a huckster. Like, I do think Peterson knows better. Like, I really do. With Shapiro, I just think it's stupid and narcissistic. that it's about him, and he's too, like, he doesn't think he's fooling anybody. He's just too stupid to know that what he's saying is Nazism. That's it. Wow, a bunch of people are looking at me. Haha. He's the cool kid's philosopher, mainly because only a child would believe him. Well, I mean, like, oh, but good to see you, Watson, late in the game. Like, Peterson had an interesting road into his position, because he initially comes into sort of social consciousness as just like a guy who's saying, hey, clean up your room, basically, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? But you hear that a lot from people who comment on Peterson. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, what's so wrong with that, right? But that Peterson, he's dangerous as a figure because of his individualistic fundamentalism, right? That he views the individual as exclusively important. That there is literally no such thing as collective as collectiveness. Like, literally, it doesn't exist. The idea of, like, collective action or collective thought. And his position is that any action towards collective, to any kind of collective movement, will ultimately lead to disaster. Interestingly, he excludes things like businesses from this. He excludes things like the military from this. He excludes things like government, the court system, right, from this. Right, basically anything that's pro-capitalist he excludes from this, because he's a fraud, right? That interestingly, Shapiro isn't a fraud. Like, I think that Shapiro is what he is. Like, I think he believes what he says, even though it's extremely stupid. What he professes, I think he believes it. I don't think Peterson believes anything he says anymore. I literally think that he's just a gun for hire, and I think he knows that he's a gun for hire, and that he has this sort of academic credibility about him, which has garnered him a lot of supporters and has garnered him a lot of success. But the stuff that he's saying now, like the stuff that he was saying when he first became popular, was not this dumb. Like, the stuff that he's saying now is so dumb and so contrary. Like, he must know better than this. Like, he must. There's just no possible way that his climate change denial stuff is where you can really turn on him, right? Like, the shit he says about climate change is so fucking stupid. Like, so fucking stupid that he has to know that it's a lie. He has to know that he's telling a lie. And, like, this neo-Marxist postmodernist nonsense, fucking dude, just say the Jews, okay? Just fucking say it. Like, that's what all your listeners hear, right? That's what people get from it. When you say cultural Marxists, like, we know you're talking about the Jews. Like, stop fucking pretending. And they will. They will. They'll stop pretending, right? And it'll be, well, I mean, the most interesting observation that anybody pointed out to me about Peterson was that he's not even that well regarded within his own field. Like, he's not even that well regarded within his own field. And that was a moment where I was like, oh yeah, interesting point. Like you think about somebody like Noam Chomsky, right? Like, Noam Chomsky's field is linguistics. That's where he stands. And he's also involved in political activism. And but in the field of linguistics, he's extremely well regarded, right? Like, people call him like the Einstein of linguistics. That when he produces a paper in the field of linguistics, people in the linguistics field pay attention to him, right? But with Peterson, it's like nobody in his own field is like, well, you got to listen to this thing Peterson had to say. He wrote this really interesting thing, right? So it really is just like a case in point that like the billionaires can basically grab anybody and shove them in front of you and then suddenly make them famous and force you to talk about them simply by the force of their power. I think that's really what Peterson reveals to us. Is anyone can be extremely famous if the billionaire class thinks it's useful to jam them in front of us and be like, your life is bad because of you and no other reason. Pay no attention to systems. There is no such thing as collective action. Right? Yeah, it will be a dark day when he passes away. Chomsky is doing us big favors, though. He's doing us big favors. In his final years, he's introducing us to new voices. He's essentially like when he does interviews now, he's doing interviews with other people. There's one Indian professor that he keeps bringing wherever he goes, and showing it, and of course I forget his name, and and he keeps like bringing forward people like Chris Hedges, right? He keeps bringing forward these other people because I think he sees it now. He's trying to pass that baton, and he's trying to signal without being like this guy, right? But he's definitely like knighted people. He said, yeah, that's the guy, Vijay Prashad, exactly. Thank you, broccoli cheddar rice. I appreciate that. He's definitely like knighted certain people, right? Yeah, Vijay Prashad, the man. Watch People's Dispatch, right? So exactly. So here is a person who Noam Chomsky, understanding, like Noam has his hand on the golden door, guys. Like if it comes down the pipe that he dies today, I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, we still got some time with Noam Chomsky. Like, that guy's going at any fucking moment. Like, literally. Like, he could be dying right now. And if I find out that he's dying right now while I'm talking about it, I'm going to be very weirded out by that. But, like, he knows. He's a smart guy. He can put two and two together and be like, yeah, it takes me 40 minutes to pee. Like, and so I think he's doing us a favor and pointing at people like Vijay Prashad and being like, I'm going to go. This guy's going to carry on my mantle, right? Just how there was Socrates and then Plato, right? That Socrates basically went, Plato, you're the guy. And then Plato carries on in Socrates's footsteps. I think a similar thing is going to happen there with Vijay Prashad. And because anytime I listen to Vijay Prashad, I'm just like, yeah, like this guy's laying it out. Like it sounds completely accurate. And then to complete the total trifecta, because Kanye West, holy shit. Hassan once again has done really good work on this. Like he's the guy that really cracked it all open and has done the step-by-step analysis, so the rest of us don't have to. So if you really want to see the Kanye West breakdown, just go watch Hassan's stuff. He's done a fine job. And the question is Kanye West just crazy? Like, is he nuts, or does he know what he's doing? Right? Like that's kind of the question. And who fucking knows? I just think that what's interesting about Kanye West is that he reveals to us that the divide in the society is not a racial one. It is a class one. That even like a black rapper who has ascended into this position of being a billionaire, right? Even he will turn into this virulent anti-Semitic racist and use racist rhetoric in order to deflect a populace towards a minority group as long as it protects his status, right? And I think that it's like I do think that he is being used by the billionaire class and by organizations like the Trump Organization in order to get these ideas into the public space. And because like Kanye West is untouchable. Like he doesn't give a fuck about things like legacy. He doesn't care about or he doesn't care about his like the music that he's made in the past. This is a guy that literally is standing around being like, I'm Michelangelo, I'm Shakespeare. Like he says this stuff about himself, that I'm a modern day genius. Like this is his opinion of himself. He doesn't give a fuck about any of that, right? Yeah. Yep. They wrote a book together recently, The Fragility of U.S. Power or something. Yep. You're all mad because he's proud to be a gay fish. That and that Kardashian booty, dude. His divorce has fucking totally fucked him up, for sure. Like it's pretty clear to me that the Kardashians are getting away from Kanye West because of all of this. Like straight up, like he's going down this ridiculous, like power mad journey. And what's fucked up about the whole thing is that it's completely unnecessary. Like, that's what's the most fucked up thing about Kanye West. He doesn't need to do any of this. It's completely unnecessary. And he's just doing it anyway. It's very, very wild to watch. Like, it's very wild. Like, Kanye West is like he's not okay. Right? Like, he's not okay. And we watch people destroy themselves in public. I think the saddest one that we ever watched was Amy Winehouse. That we watched Amy Winehouse commit suicide. We knew what was happening there. Everybody knew about it. Like, everybody knew about it. Nobody thought that Amy Winehouse was gonna do anything else. And when she did it, like people were sad, right? And there was this sense of mourning that happened, but no one was surprised. So we all just like collectively watched this woman commit suicide. And we've seen people disintegrate in front of us over the course of years, right? Like Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's just like a descent into total madness. His life story is just like, this is incredible. It's a crazy story. and his twilight years, his descent, right? Like he essentially becomes like a fucking ghost of a type, right? Chris Farley. The only thing I wish that Chris Farley, if Chris Farley was alive today, I think things would be a lot better for all of us. I think we'd be laughing a lot more if Chris Farley was around today. Right? I just think that like the universe took a look at Chris Farley and was just like, yeah, no, you're too pure for this world. You're not gonna handle like cancel culture and like that whole thing. Like none of that's and the deep shame is that he never got to play Rob Ford, right? Like, can you imagine Chris Farley just doing the deposition that he had with the Toronto City Council where he admitted to doing crack? Like, that's it. No changes, No trying to make it spoofy or any of that kind of stuff. Literally just have Chris Farley as Rob Ford confessing to doing crack. It's hilarious. That's fucking the funniest thing that would have ever been on television. It's just amazing. And we missed it. We missed it because he's too pure. Chris Farley. Not a genius. Not a genius. But we were always happy when when Chris Farley came on screen, where I was like, this is better. Things are better now. He's like, you were saying this earlier, Ryan Reynolds. He's like Ryan Reynolds that way. Like, Ryan Reynolds is not a terrific actor. His movies are not overwhelmingly good. Like, Deadpool is not the greatest shit you've ever seen, right? It's not seminal. It's not important, right? It's not like it's not amazing, right? As far as these superhero movies go and distractions go, it's like, it's reasonable. You get some giggles and some chuckles for sure. But the reason why you love them, the reason why you love Daredevil, the reason why John Smith loves Daredevil is not because they're good. It's because you love Ryan Reynolds. That's really the truth. Like, that Ryan Reynolds is not, we don't like him because he's an actor. We don't even care that much about the character, right? We love Ryan Reynolds. And I think that's really the truth. That when you see him in interviews and when the way that he presents himself, you just fall in love with him. You just really do. And I think Chris Farley had that same kind of thing. That you just fell in love with him. You know? And you, like, Tommy Boy was a piece of shit. Beverly Hills Ninja was a piece of shit. Like, all of Farley's movies were shit. Right? Like, they weren't good. The whole premises were, like, stupid as shit. Every single time. But, you know, you still watched him and you still laughed because you loved Chris Farley. And that's it. And when you'd encounter somebody who would be like, those movies are stupid, and you're stupid for liking them, my response steadily became like, yeah, you're right. Because they didn't love Chris Farley. That's all it came down to. That they looked at Chris Farley as just like a dumb boob who wasn't entertaining to them. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. That's fine. You love what you love, and you love who you love. And if you love Chris Farley, then he can do anything. And you just be like, yeah. And if you love Ryan Reynolds, then he can do anything. And you're going to watch it and you're going to enjoy it. Because you just love that person. That's it. That's the power of love. That's the power of love. George Carlin right now, dude. George Carlin's clips are really circulating right now. Carlin is going to be described as ahead of his time. Like, he's a lot of the shit that he was saying when he was alive is, like, crucially important right now. And a lot of people are sending his clips around. And I see his stuff. I see George Carlin like 3 times a day now. Like, when I'm going around socials, when I'm on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or any of this kind of stuff, right? I see George Carlin like 3 times now. That's a fuck ton. That is a lot to see of anybody. And George Carlin's like, and when he's talking, he's laying it right out, dude. Like, he's laying it right out. And one thing that I have come to recognize, the reason why you see Bill Hicks less is because Bill Hicks was more timely in his era, right? Like, he talked a lot about JFK stuff and that kind of thing. George Carlin is extremely specific and very neoliberal focused. I don't think he ever uses the word neoliberal, but like a lot of what he says really matters. And Carlin, and seeing Carlin this last year over and over and over again has made me really recognize something about what's happening in modern comedy. and that's that. I think George Carlin would despise these modern comedians. I think that he would take a look at people like Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, Joe Rogan, and he would absolutely say to these guys, so your country's being taken over by fundamentalist evangelical Christians, and the butt of your punchline is the purple with pink hair is the person with pink hair sitting in the corner over there. If you say so, champ. If you say so. Like, when Chappelle came out and did his whole, like, trans march kind of thing, I defended it, and I still defend his right to have done so, because I believe that art is sacred, and is a sacred space. But, like, they're really letting these fundies off the hook, eh? Like, they're really letting these fundamentalist Christians off the hook. Isn't that interesting? And that's something that I think that George Carlin has helped me recognize in this period of time. That, like, yeah, tell your jokes about trans people, right? Like, tell a couple of jokes about trans people, sure, right? Where's your fundamentalist jokes? Where's the jokes about people who think Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment? Where's your jokes about Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell? Where's your jokes about Orton or whatever the fuck his dumb name is? Where's your Mitch McConnell material, man? Like, where's your Donald Trump material? Like, I don't get this. You're for real just going after people who are exploring, like, this gender issue? Like, that's your big plank? That's the thing you're planting your flag in? That's the thing? Ricky Gervais as well. It's just like, what the fuck are you wasting your time with here, bud? Like, what the fuck are you wasting your time with? I think that's what Carlin would be saying. Like, yeah, sure, bud. The greatest thing to highlight in America is girls who want to be boys and boys who want to be girls. Yeah, that's definitely the thing that we should be absolutely hyper focusing on right now. Certainly not the fundamentalist Christians who think the rapture is going to come at any moment and are going to purge the Muslims and the Jews and the Hindus and the Buddhists from our society. Yeah, sure. Those are, yeah, that there's no material there. Nothing worth paying any attention to there. And it really, really made me recognize and realize that, like, Carlin was just better than all those guys. Like, Carlin was just better than Chappelle and Rogan and all of these comedians. Like, all of them. He was just better. Because he knew what the target was. He knew what we were shooting at. And he's going to live forever. Right? Oh yeah, don't forget about the indigenous pagans. How could we forget about the indigenous pagans? Of course. And what's so interesting about Carlin, I read his final book, and he outright said, I don't think these monkeys are going to figure this out. And if they do, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, literally, as he's walking out the door, he's basically just like, fuck off. Don't talk about me. I'm not interested in being a part of this. And here we are. Now, too bad, George. Like, too bad. I'm going to spread your shit around. Right? And to me, like, the real truth about it, like, I see Dave Chappelle clips come up on my feed now. Right? Because I'm like, Dave Chappelle comes up, and I listen. And then George Carlin comes up and I listen. And then later on, Chappelle comes back up again. I'm just like, Chappelle is going to die before Carlin does. Like, that to me is the absolute truth. That they say that people experience two deaths, right? The first death is their physical death, and then the second death is the last time someone says their name. Chappelle will die before Carlin. Because what Carlin said is like, literally the words he said goes after the highest offices and the highest people in this country, and will continue to do so until the revolution. what Chappelle was talking about and the controversy he was talking about. Like, it as we move along on this journey and our awareness of trans people increases and our awareness of what their journey is, we're going to look back on what Dave Chappelle was doing, which I think was timely and was important in that moment, but we will look back on it and go, ooh, yeah, man, we were kind of stupid about that, eh? We were kind of like children about that. It's not going to age very well, right? It's not going to age very well. Whereas I think Carlin is going to be eternal. Like, in fact, the farther along we go, the better it seems to age. That when he first did it, I think people were like, what is happening? And now as we're farther along, I think it's crystallizing for people. I think people are seeing Carlin's stuff and being like, oh shit, that's even more impactful now than it was the first time I saw it. You know? Anyway, I've gone extremely late. I feel bad about showing up late, and I also feel bad about what happened yesterday, so I'm trying to make up for lost time, I suppose. Also, I have tomorrow off. Day off. And I'm going to close by saying this. I'm very proud of myself. I'm proud of myself because over the COVID period, I was drinking a lot. I was drinking a lot over the COVID period. And my mood, and I had recognized that I was drinking too much. It was almost daily. And I had negotiated myself into a position to be like, okay, John, like every day, come on, dude. And I gave myself permission once a week. And so today would be the day. And I have come to see that the day that I would drink, I wouldn't enjoy the drinking. Like, I get a little wobbly and things would be kind of, all that kind of stuff, right? But I wouldn't enjoy the drinking as much. And then I lose a day. So tomorrow would be gone, right? And so today I'm very proud of myself that today is the first... It is actually the first week where I didn't go to the LCBO and I didn't pick up the alcohol. I have no alcohol in the house. And if I'm really, really honest with myself right now, the reason why I was pushing this podcast, today's episode, to 10 o'clock was because the wine rack closes at 10. And so I can't even tempt myself with that. I can't even be like, I could go get a bottle of wine. So that's over. So it's over. And I think wow, I'm kind of getting emotional about it. More emotional than I thought I would be. Interesting. So I'm proud of myself today. And I know that tomorrow is going to be a good day. That I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do some yoga. I'm going to clean my apartment. I'm going to move around. I'm going to I don't know, maybe even do some writing if I'm lucky. Hopefully fucking this cough will stop. Will go away at some point. So I'm proud of myself. And I just wanted to share that just wanted to share that. Oh, I don't know if I would call it sobriety quite yet, John, but it's definitely like, it's definitely a it's a constant fight. Like we all know why we do alcohol. Like, let's not bullshit ourselves. Like, we're not doing it for the health benefits. We're doing it because we live in our heads and alcohol kills that. That's why we're doing it. And we're a culture that believes we're brains in bodies. Gonna end the stream with some of this. You guys know it, right? You guys know it. We think that we're brains in bodies instead of bodies with brains. And so all we do is hyper-focus here and send all of our energy here and all of our focus here, and it's intolerable. It's intolerable. Right? It's intolerable. And so we drink. Because the drink kills this. It just shuts this shit off. It makes it so that you can't get energy in here. Or if you do get energy in here, it's just wobbly and weird and you can't really interact with it. And that's why we drink. And part of the thing that's helped me move away from that is this constant refrain and this constant recognition and this constant realization. I am not a brain in a body. I am a body with a brain. And I can send that energy and the focus away from the brain into other places. And I have, and I do. And that helps a lot. Pay attention to other things. Send your energy elsewhere. Stop giving this so much authority. It's not actually in control. It's not. Like, it just isn't. And I mean, but Rusty, this makes sense. When you drink and it begins to wear off, you get massive anxiety. That makes total sense. Right? Because you've drunk and you shut this down. Right? You shut this down, so this is dead. Or at least incapacitated. Right? And so you're too stupid to feel anxiety. Right? So you freed yourself from anxiety while you're drinking. Because you're too dumb. Right? A big part of experiencing anxiety is being able to perceive things that aren't real and perceive things that may happen, right? And that's what it is. You're like worried that something might occur, right? So you can imagine and envision that. So then you drink something and just like kill that. And then you're walking around the world being like, yeah, I'm the greatest king shit of all Turd Mountain, right? And then it wears off. And then you return to your original state and the awareness begins to come back. But now you're also physically incapacitated because you poisoned yourself. So you're less capable to actually center yourself and right yourself. And so you fall victim to imagining scenarios that might exist but don't. And you don't have any capacity to defend yourself against that. I think that narrative makes a lot of sense to me. Like, a lot of sense to me. Alright, guys. We did it. We actually made it to the end of the episode without the CIA cutting off the stream. We made it to the end of the episode without me coughing my lungs out. I read through an article. I did it. John Smith gonna leave us with a real gem right here. I can feel it. You guys aren't doing it right. You know what? I'm gonna just close it. Always remember. Oh, alcohol with the Brita filter. Fuck you, dude. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.